Hey friends, it's your girl Mia. This is Mia Horror Stories. And tonight's story, the survival guide for my morning commute, says to ignore the woman in seat 13, is told in darkness. The screen will stay black, so you can simply listen, imagine, and feel every moment without distraction. Trust me, the build-up matters, and the ending is where the real chill hides. So don't look away, and don't leave early. The first page of the survival guide had been taped over the regular commuter timetable with such care that, for almost 3 stops, nobody seemed to notice it did not belong there. It was a single sheet of printer paper inside a clear plastic sleeve, fixed to the wall above the fold-down luggage rack with 4 squares of gray duct tape. The paper was titled Survival Guide, Eastbound Morning Service, in plain black type. No logo, no transport authority seal. Beneath the title were numbered instructions, though most were too small to read from where I stood. The only line printed in bold was large enough to make out across the aisle. Do not speak to the woman in seat 13. That was strange, but not impossible. London commuters taped up advertisements for missing cats, union meetings, room rentals, petitions, salsa classes, and conspiracy theories about mobile towers. A bored teenager could have made it. Somebody from the cleaning crew might have missed it. The duct tape was probably the only remarkable part. It had been pressed flat at the corners, with no wrinkles or fingerprints in the adhesive. The woman in seat 13 was already looking at me. My name is Daniel Mercer. I was 34 years old, male, and at 7:18 on a wet Tuesday morning, my most urgent concern was getting from St. Albans City to Blackfriars without being late for a performance review. I had spent the entire weekend pretending not to fear. I worked in compliance for a financial software company near Southwark Bridge, which meant I spent my days telling louder, better paid people why they could not do what they had already decided to do. I had been sleeping badly for weeks. Not dramatically. No nightmares, no waking screams. Just the thin, useless sleep of a man who checks the time every 40 minutes and calculates how ruined tomorrow will be. The carriage rocked gently as we left Radlett. Rain scratched across the windows in diagonal lines. Somewhere behind me, a takeaway cup lid squeaked each time its owner squeezed it. The train smelled of wet wool, old coffee, and the lemon disinfectant used on the tables. Seat 13 was across the aisle, facing forward, beside the window. The woman sitting there appeared to be in her late 40s. She wore a navy raincoat buttoned to the throat and held a black handbag flat across her knees with both hands. Her hair was dark brown, streaked with gray at the temples, cut just below her jaw. She had no coffee, no phone, and no visible headphones. That alone made her unusual enough to notice. She watched me with a steady, patient expression. Not angry, not frightened. Expectant. I looked away first. There were no numbered seats on that particular Thameslink service, at least not officially. The numbers had been added using small white stickers beneath the headrests. I had not noticed them when I boarded, but now I could see 11, 12, 13, and 14 arranged along the row. The stickers were clean and identical, their edges perfectly aligned. woman was sitting directly beneath number 13. I moved my shoulder bag higher and tried to tell myself that somebody was filming a prank. Hidden cameras, social media content, a group of students watching from another carriage, waiting to see who read the sign and reacted. A man near the doors glanced up at the guide, frowned, then returned to his phone. His name, I would learn a few minutes later, was Martin Hale. He was 58 years old, male, broad through the shoulders, with a red face and the careful posture of someone protecting a painful lower back. He wore a high-visibility jacket under an open navy coat and had a plastic ID card clipped to his belt. He kept lifting his reading glasses onto his forehead, forgetting they were there, then patting his pockets when he wanted them again. Martin caught me looking at the sign. "Someone having a laugh?" he asked. His voice carried more than he intended. 3 people looked up. "Looks like it," I said. The woman in seat 13 continued to watch me. Martin squinted at the page. Survival guide. Bit dramatic for Thameslink. A younger woman seated beside him laughed through her nose, without looking away from her laptop. Her name was Alice Novick. She was 27 years old, female, Polish-born, and living in Luton, though none of that was obvious at first, except for the faint accent that sharpened certain consonants when she spoke. She had pale blonde hair tied into a hurried knot, a charcoal coat folded beneath her on the seat, and a small silver ring through one eyebrow. Her laptop screen showed a spreadsheet covered in colored cells. A hospital badge hung from a blue cord around her neck. "Depends on the day," Alice said. "Last Thursday, the toilets flooded." Martin pointed at the guide. "You seen this before?" "No." She looked at it then, reading more carefully. The humor left her face. "What?" I asked. Alice closed her laptop halfway. "Nothing." "What does the rest say?" "You can read it." "I'm not close enough." She hesitated, then leaned sideways to get a better angle. "Number 1, she said, remain in your original carriage until London Blackfriars. Number 2, do not use the rear toilet after St. Albans. Number 3, ignore requests to open the connecting door." Martin gave a small laugh. "There you are, horror movie nonsense." Alice continued. "Number 4 says not to speak to the woman in seat 13. The woman shifted her handbag. The leather made a dry creaking sound. Alice stopped reading. Martin followed her gaze, then looked at me as though I had arranged the situation. "Which one's seat 13? I nodded across the aisle before I could stop myself. The woman smiled. It was a normal smile, brief, closed mouth, polite. The sort of smile strangers exchange when they realize they are being discussed and would rather spare everyone the embarrassment. Martin lowered his glasses onto his nose. "Sorry, love," he said to her. "Some idiots put up a sign." She looked at him. The guide said not to speak to her. It did not say she would not speak back. That distinction occurred to me in the half-second before she answered. "I know," she said. Her voice was low and clear. Martin smiled uncertainly. "You know?" "Yes." She looked at the guide above us, then back at him. "I put it there." The train entered Elstree Tunnel. The daylight vanished. The windows turned black, reflecting the carriage back at us. Rows of tired faces, fluorescent tubes humming overhead, coats shining with rainwater. Ills produced a heavier, enclosed roar. Mobile signal indicators dropped from bars to empty triangles. For a few seconds, everyone near us seemed to become interested. The woman's reflection remained fixed on Martin. Martin laughed again, but weaker. "Right, good one. It isn't a joke," she said. Nobody replied. Then the train emerged from the tunnel, and daylight returned with such ordinary grayness that the moment loosened. A phone rang near the far doors. Someone unwrapped a cereal bar. Alice reopened her laptop. Martin shook his head. "People are odd," he murmured. He said it loudly enough for the woman to hear. She did not react. I checked the time. 7:23. My manager had scheduled the review for 9. I had 50 unread emails, 3 policy documents to revise, and a private certainty that the meeting was not really about performance. 2 months earlier, I had flagged irregularities in a client account. The sales director had called me overcautious. A week later, the account vanished from our internal system. Since then, invitations had been disappearing from my calendar. Conversations stopped when I entered rooms, and my manager had begun documenting mistakes that had never mattered before. My flaw, if I had to name it, was simple. I noticed trouble early and acted late. I could spend hours building a case in my head, identifying every possible outcome, waiting for one final piece of evidence that would remove all doubt. By the time doubt disappeared, the decision had usually been made by somebody else. The train slowed unexpectedly between stations. The braking was mild but uneven, a soft lurch followed by a longer drag. Coffee shifted inside cups. Alice caught her laptop before it slid from her knees. An automated chime sounded. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are currently being held at a red signal. We hope to be moving shortly." A collective exhale passed through the carriage. Martin checked his watch. Every bloody time. Alice's fingers moved over her keyboard, but the laptop no longer appeared to hold her attention. She kept glancing at the paper. I stepped closer. "Can I see the rest?" "You can stand there," Alice said. "I'm not stopping you." There were 7 instructions. The 5th said, "If the train stops between ELSDRE and West HAMPSDAD, do not leave your seat until the driver SBAKS." I was standing. It was ridiculous that this mattered. The train had stopped at a signal, which happened constantly. The guide could have been written by someone who used the route. A regular commuter could predict delays the way fishermen predicted weather. Still, I sat in the nearest empty seat. Martin noticed. "Seriously, better than standing." "Of course." The woman in seat 13 turned her face toward the rain-darkened window. I read the 6th instruction. "Do not trust any announcement made by a passenger." The 7th was shorter. "If the lights go out, close your eyes." I stared at that one for several seconds. "Daniel," I looked up. Alice was watching me. "You have an ID badge," she said. I glanced down. My work pass had slipped outside my coat. "That's how you know my name?" "Yes." The fact that she explained it made me like her slightly. "You work at St. Thomas?" I asked, nodding at her badge. "Night shift in pathology." "You're going home?" She shook her head. "Training day. Bad planning." Her eyes were pink at the edges. She had the flattened, impatient calm of someone too tired to perform fear properly. "You think she wrote it?" I asked quietly. Alice looked across the aisle. The woman's hands still rested on her handbag. Her fingernails were short and unpainted. A faint bruise marked the inside of her left wrist, yellowing at the edges. "I think she said she did," Alice replied. "That's not what I asked." "No," Martin had begun a call, holding his phone close to his mouth. "Signal's rubbish," he said. "Yeah, stuck outside, no. Not sure where, tell Steve I'll be there." The call cut off. He swore and shoved the phone into his pocket. The train remained still. Rain ticked against the windows. The overhead lights flickered once, not going out, just dimming enough to reveal their faint green afterglow. Several passengers muttered. The woman in seat 13 closed her eyes. That was the first thing she had done that did not feel performative. Alice noticed too. A baby began fussing somewhere in the next carriage. Sound came through the connecting door in short, muffled bursts. Then someone knocked on that door. 3 hard taps. A pause, 3 more. The carriage layout was open enough that, from where I sat, I could see the connecting door at the rear. Its narrow glass panel showed only the dim vestibule beyond and a slice of the neighboring carriage. A man's face appeared briefly behind the glass, distorted by reflection. He pushed the door handle. It did not open. He knocked again. "Can someone let me through?" he called. Martin looked over his shoulder. The guide's third instruction seemed to become larger without changing size. "Ignore requests to open the connecting door." Martin stood. "Oh, come on," Alice said. "He's probably got a jammed handle. Then he can use the other door." "What other door?" "The one at the opposite end of his carriage." The man knocked harder. "Hello, can you open this?" A few passengers looked at each other. Nobody moved. Martin glanced at the woman in seat 13. She had opened her eyes again. "Don't," she said. Martin's expression tightened. "You don't run the train." "No, then stop telling people what to do." He stepped into the aisle. The train jerked forward 6 inches and stopped again. Martin caught the top of a seat. Pain crossed his face, quick and private, as his back twisted. "You all right?" Alice asked. "Fine." The man behind the door hit the glass with the flat of his hand. "Please open it." The word "please" changed the atmosphere more effectively than shouting would have. It made him sound embarrassed, normal. A person stuck behind a faulty door while strangers stared. I could see him more clearly now. Mid-30s, perhaps, dark suit, white shirt open at the collar. One hand braced against the glass. There was something dark on his cuff. Grease, maybe, coffee. The woman in seat 13 leaned slightly toward me. "Daniel," she said. I had never told her my name. Alice had said it quietly, but the woman could have heard. She was only a few feet away. There was no mystery in that. "Sit down," the woman said. Martin looked from her to me. "This is stupid." He reached for the connecting door. A second figure moved into view behind the suited man, only for a moment. A uniform, fluorescent yellow, a hand rising as though to signal. Then both figures disappeared from the narrow window. The knocking stopped. The train's intercom clicked on. No announcement followed. Just a low electrical hiss and the distant sound of someone breathing near a microphone. Martin's hand hovered inches from the release button. Alice closed her laptop fully. The woman in seat 13 tightened both hands around her handbag. I looked from the printed guide to the door, then to the red emergency communication handle mounted beside it. Pulling it would alert the driver. It might also delay the train further, create an incident, bring transport police, and guarantee I missed the meeting that might decide whether I still had a job by lunchtime. Doing nothing meant accepting instructions from a stranger who had somehow anticipated the exact place the train would stop. The intercom clicked off. A moment later, the exterior door alarm began beeping. Not the connecting door. One of the passenger doors on our left. The train was still between stations. Above the door, the red warning light flashed. A recorded voice said, "Door release enabled." Martin turned away from the connecting door. "That shouldn't happen," Alice said. No one moved. Outside the rain-streaked window, the trackside embankment dropped toward a line of warehouses and wet service roads. We were nowhere near a platform. The door button lit green. The woman in seat 13 looked directly at me. "You need to decide which instruction matters," she said. The passenger door gave a mechanical clunk, ready to open, and the emergency handle was still within reach. The green door button stayed lit for 3 seconds, long enough for everyone to understand what it meant. Then Martin pressed it. The passenger door released with a compressed sigh and slid 6 inches before the safety mechanism caught. Rain blew through the gap in a fine spray, cold enough to reach the aisle. The smell outside was not clean rain or wet grass. It was hot metal, diesel, and something bitter, like burned wiring. Alice jumped up. "What are you doing?" "I barely touched it. You pressed the button. It shouldn't have worked." Martin shoved his palm against the edge of the door, trying to push it closed. Moved half an inch, juddered, then stopped. The warning alarm continued its steady electronic beeping. A few passengers rose from their seats. Others remained still, watching with the stiff concentration people use when they hope somebody else will become responsible. The woman in seat 13 did not move. "Pull the emergency handle," Alice told me. I looked at the red handle. "I thought that stops the train." "The train is already stopped." "It alerts the driver," she said. "Do it." I reached for it. "Don't," the woman said. Alice turned on her. "You've told us not to open that door, and now this one is opening onto the tracks. Unless your leaflet has a maintenance manual on the back, stop interfering." The woman met her stare without blinking. "The driver knows the door is open." "How?" "The system will show it." And if the system is wrong, the door alarm stopped. That was worse. The green button remained illuminated, but the carriage fell back into the ordinary sounds of rain, ventilation, and clothing shifting against plastic seats. Without the alarm, the half-open door looked less like an emergency and more like something someone had forgotten to finish. Martin stepped back from it. "I didn't force anything," he said. "You all saw that." Nobody answered. Outside, the railway line curved south between an embankment and a service road. The nearest warehouse sat perhaps 200 meters away, its loading bays closed. A chain link fence ran beside the track, topped with 3 strands of wire. There was no platform, no obvious way off. Alice put her laptop into her bag. "We need to close the door manually." "Do you know how?" I asked. "No." "Then we shouldn't touch it." She stared at me. "That seems to be your answer to everything." It landed harder than she could have known. Before I could respond, the intercom clicked. This time a man spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the driver. We have a door control fault in the fifth carriage. Please remain seated and do not attempt to operate any doors. Assistance has been requested. The voice sounded professional, but something was wrong with the rhythm. Each sentence came after a fractionally long pause, as if he were reading words displayed one at a time. Martin pointed toward the ceiling. There, driver knows. Alice glanced at the survival guide. Do not trust any announcement made by a passenger. That was the driver, Martin said, following her gaze. It said it was. Oh, for God's sake. The woman in seat 13 lowered her eyes to her handbag. I looked toward the front of the carriage. Above the connecting door, a digital display showed our destination and the time, 07:26. The seconds were not changing. I checked my phone. 07:28. No signal. A man several rows down said, "My Wi-Fi's gone too." "That happens when we stop," somebody replied. The open door shifted with a metallic knock. Not wider, just enough to make Martin flinch. Alice crouched beside it, careful not to put her fingers near the edge. She inspected the rubber seals and the narrow gap between the door and frame. "There's something blocking it." "What?" I asked. "I can't see." Rainwater had begun gathering on the floor. It spread beneath the seats in a shallow, trembling sheet. Martin took a folded newspaper from his bag and pushed one corner into the gap. Alice slapped it away. "Don't put things in there. I was checking. You're making it worse. I'm trying to help." "You already opened it." Martin's face reddened. For a moment, I thought he might shout. Instead, he bent to retrieve the newspaper, moving carefully because of his back. At the rear connecting door, someone knocked again. Not 3 times now. A fast, irregular pounding. "Open up," the suited man called. "There's smoke back here." Half the carriage turned. The woman in seat 13 closed both hands around her bag. The suited man appeared behind the glass. His face was damp, though whether from sweat or rain I could not tell. He struck the window with the heel of his hand. "Listen to me. Something's burning in the next carriage." A woman near the luggage rack stood. "We should let him through." "No," the woman in seat 13 said. The standing passenger looked at her. "There's a fire." He said, "There's smoke." "That's not better." This new passenger was Rachel Doyle, 41 years old, female, a secondary school administrator from Borehamwood. She wore a green quilted coat and carried a large canvas tote printed with the logo of a children's literacy charity. Her brown hair had been hastily straightened, leaving the ends slightly frizzed from the damp. She had spent the journey correcting attendance records on her phone and sending voice notes to someone called Tom about a forgotten football kit. Rachel moved toward the connecting door. The suited man saw her. "Yes, thank you. Press the silver plate." "Wait," I said. She looked back. "For what?" "I don't know." "Exactly." The private fear I had carried onto the train, losing my job, losing the shape of my life, being publicly told I was no longer necessary, suddenly felt small enough to be embarrassing. Yet the habit behind it remained. I wanted certainty. I wanted someone in uniform to appear, identify the fault, and issue one correct instruction. Instead, there were 2 doors, one open to the tracks, and one sealed against a man claiming there was smoke. I stood between them doing nothing. Alice sniffed the air. I can smell it. The bitter odor had strengthened, not enough to sting the eyes, but enough to coat the back of the throat. Martin sniffed too. Could be the brakes. The train isn't moving. Brakes can overheat before you stop. Not usually inside the carriage. The intercom clicked again. Passengers are reminded to remain seated. Do not open the internal carriage doors. There's no fire. The suited man behind the glass stopped pounding. He looked upward at the speaker. Then he looked directly at us and shook his head. Rachel's hand hovered over the silver release plate. Alice said, "Why would the driver tell us there's no fire unless someone reported one?" "Because people panic," Martin replied. "How would he know what we're saying in here?" Martin opened his mouth, then closed it. The woman in seat 13 spoke quietly. "Because that wasn't the driver." Rachel stepped away from the connecting door. "You keep saying things like that," she said. "Either explain yourself or stop." The woman shook her head. "Why not?" "Because you won't believe the explanation. Try us." "No," Rachel laughed once, without humor. "Convenient." The suited man knocked again, softer this time. "Please," he said. "There's an elderly man on the floor." Alice moved closer to the glass. "What happened to him?" "He collapsed." "Is he breathing?" "I think so." "Check." "What?" "Put your face near his mouth and watch his chest." The suited man turned away. His shoulders disappeared below the window. Alice looked at me. "If someone's unconscious, we have maybe minutes, depending on why." The challenge was suddenly specific. There might be smoke in the next carriage. There might be a collapsed passenger. Exterior door was jammed open, disabling movement. The driver or someone using the intercom was ordering us not to cross between carriages. Mobile phones were useless, and the only person who seemed prepared for any of it was the woman we had been told to ignore. Alice tapped the glass. The suited man reappeared. "He's breathing," he said, slowly. "Any bleeding?" "No." "Is there visible smoke?" "Yes." "Where?" "Near the toilet. It's coming from underneath the wall panel." Alice glanced at the guide. "Number 2, do not use the rear toilet after SDALBANS." "Can you move him away from it?" she asked. "I need help." "How many people are in your carriage?" 6, maybe 7. "Then use them. They won't come near him." "Why?" The man looked over his shoulder. When he answered, his voice was lower. "Because he had a knife." Martin muttered, "Jesus." Rachel took another step back. Alice stayed where she was. "Does he still have it?" I kicked it away. "Where is it now?" "Under a seat." "People away from it." The man's gaze shifted to the woman in seat 13. His expression changed. Not recognition exactly, more like confirmation. "You," he said. The woman stood for the first time. She was shorter than I had expected, perhaps 5'3". Her handbag remained against her abdomen, held in both arms. The suited man pressed close to the glass. "You said you'd stop this." Martin looked at her. "You know him?" "No." "He knows you?" "No," she repeated. "He has seen me." "Where?" She did not answer. The burning smell thickened. Someone farther up the carriage began coughing. Alice pointed toward the exterior door. "Daniel, we need to get that shut. If the control circuit reads open, the train can't move. If smoke is spreading, staying here becomes the dangerous option." "How?" "Find the obstruction." "With what?" She looked around. "Torch." Several phones appeared. Martin turned on his flashlight and handed it to me. I knelt beside the door. Cold rain struck the side of my face. The gap was narrow, no more than the width of 2 fingers. but the flashlight showed something pale wedged near the bottom rail. "Paper," I said. "Can you pull it out?" I used the edge of Martin's newspaper to avoid putting my fingers into the mechanism. The pale material shifted. It was not paper. It was a strip of fabric, folded several times and soaked dark at one end. I hooked it carefully and drew it through the gap. A torn section of white shirt cuff dropped onto the floor. There was blood on it. Not much. A narrow rust-colored streak. The cuff had been wrapped around a small rectangular piece of plastic the size of a bank card. Alice picked up the plastic. It was a hotel-style access key, plain white, except for a printed number. Martin stared at it. "Someone jammed the door deliberately," Rachel said. "Who?" The exterior door slammed shut. The force caught all of us by surprise. Alice fell backward onto one hand. I recoiled into the opposite seats. The door seals met with a rubber thump, and the green release light went dark. For half a second, relief moved through the carriage. Then the train began rolling. No announcement, no warning tone, just movement. Slow at first, wheels clicking over the rail joints, then faster. Alice looked through the window. "We're going the wrong way." The warehouses outside began sliding past from front to rear. We were reversing north. Passengers started talking all at once. Martin grabbed a seat pole. "They're moving us back to Elstree." Without saying, Rachel asked. The train accelerated. The suited man behind the connecting door vanished from view. A moment later he returned, running alongside the glass from within his carriage, pounding again. "Open it," he shouted. "Open it now." Smoke curled into the vestibule behind him. Real smoke this time. Thin, gray, and low, slipping along the ceiling before being broken apart by the ventilation. Alice reached for the silver release plate. The woman in seat 13 moved between them. "No, there is a fire," Alice snapped. "If you open that door, he comes through. He's trying to escape. He isn't alone." A shape struck the glass behind the suited man. He jerked sideways. His face disappeared. The window showed only smoke and blurred movement. Then a hand pressed against the glass from the other side. The hand wore a fluorescent yellow sleeve, the same uniform I had glimpsed before. Its fingers were stained black. Rachel made a choking sound. Martin gripped the nearest seatback. "Rail staff, we should let them in." The woman turned to him. "Rail staff carry radios." The hand remained against the glass. Slowly, one finger lifted and pointed toward the ceiling. The intercom clicked. "Passengers in carriage 5, the male voice said, no longer pretending to sound calm. "Open the rear connecting door immediately." Alice froze with her hand above the release plate. The woman in seat 13 looked at me. "There's a manual isolation switch in the panel beside the exterior door," she said. "If you cut the carriage power, the internal lock releases. Then they can get in," I said. "Yes. Why would we do that?" "Because the smoke will reach us before the train stops." Rachel coughed again. This time I heard the roughness in her chest afterward. Alice looked between the smoke, the power panel, and the woman. "How long?" "Less than 5 minutes." "You can't know that." "I know where the fire was set." Nobody spoke. The train gathered speed in reverse, rain rattling harder against the windows. My phone finally found a trace of signal 1 bar, then none. I tried 999 anyway. The call failed before it connected. Alice grabbed my sleeve. Daniel, we have two problems. Fire behind us and no control over where this train is going. The hand on the glass withdrew. A metal tool appeared in its place. The pointed end struck the window once. A white star formed in the safety glass. The second blow widened it. Martin moved toward the front connecting door. We go forward. The woman blocked him with her voice. Rule 1. Forget the bloody rules. If you leave this carriage, you won't know who is waiting in the next one. And if we stay, we choke. The tool struck the glass again. The window held, but the cracks spread to the frame. Alice opened the wall panel beside the exterior door. Inside were rows of labeled switches and a yellow lever sealed beneath a plastic cover. She looked at me. You understand systems, she said. Which one isolates the carriage? I understand financial controls. Read the labels. The words were small, technical, and partially obscured by condensation. Lighting, ventilation, door circuit, passenger information, auxiliary power. Outside, the train entered Elstree Tunnel. Darkness swallowed the windows. The overhead lights flickered. The guide's 7th instruction came back to me. If the lights go out, close your eyes. The tool hit the connecting door glass again. At the same moment, every light in the carriage failed. Emergency strips glowed dim green along the floor. People shouted. A child cried. Someone dropped a phone, and it skittered under the seats with its flashlight spinning. In the darkness, the woman in seat 13 said, "Close your eyes." I did not. The green emergency light was enough to see Alice crouched at the panel, Martin moving toward the front door, Rachel covering her mouth with her sleeve. It was also enough to see that seat 13 was empty. The woman's handbag lay on the cushion, and from somewhere behind me, close enough that I felt breath move against my ear, her voice whispered, "Don't pull the yellow lever. That is what they need you to do." Woman's breath touched my ear, but when I turned, she was already crouched beside Alice at the open electrical panel. There was no trick to it, no impossible movement. The emergency lights had changed everyone into pieces, knees, hands, pale faces, and she had crossed behind the seat backs while I was watching Martin. That was all. It still took me a second to accept. "Then, what does the yellow lever do?" Alice asked. "Battery isolation," the woman said. "You just said it releases the lock." It does. It also kills the emergency ventilation. Smoke had begun to feather through the cracked connecting door frame. In the green floor lighting, it looked thicker than it was, a gray sheet crawling just beneath the ceiling. Several passengers ducked instinctively. The tool struck the safety glass again. A chunk of the outer layer whitened, but did not fall. Alice pointed into the panel. "Which switch keeps ventilation on and kills only the door circuit?" The woman looked at the labels. "I don't know." That answer frightened me more than the others. Until then, she had spoken like someone following steps already rehearsed. Now she sounded like the rest of us. Martin reached the front connecting door, the one leading toward carriage 4 and the driver's cab beyond several more coaches. He pressed the silver plate. Nothing happened. "Locked," he said. "Try the manual release," Rachel called. "There isn't one." "There has to be." Martin ran his hand around the frame, breathing hard. His back had stiffened during the sudden movement of the train. He kept one leg straighter than the other and twisted from the hips rather than the waist. The train rushed north through Elstree Tunnel. The tunnel walls were only a few feet outside the windows, wet brick and cable trays flashing in the scattered light from our phones. We were in the southern bore, moving backward along the track we had just traveled. The rear of our carriage now led north, toward Elstree and Boreham Wood. The front led south, toward London, but the train was carrying us in the opposite direction. I drew the carriage in my head because mapping it made the panic smaller. At the northern end, behind us, was the cracked door to carriage 6, where the suited man, the smoke, and the fluorescent sleeve had appeared. At the southern end was the locked door to carriage 4. On the western side, the exterior passenger door had jammed open and then shut. Seat 13 sat midway down the eastern side, beside the tunnel wall. We were a sealed box moving backward, with danger at one end and uncertainty at the other. "Daniel," Alice said, "door circuit." I crouched beside her. The switches were narrow black rockers with abbreviated labels printed in white. SAL LTG, Vent AUX, PIS, INT Doctor EXD Doctor. Internal door, I said. Alice put her thumb on the switch marked INT Doctor. The woman caught her wrist. "Wait," Alice pulled free. "We cannot keep waiting. If you cut it, both internal doors may release." "That's the point." "Both," the woman repeated. Martin understood first. "The rear one too." Another strike hit the cracked glass. Alice swore under her breath. "Then we barricaded." "With what?" Rachel asked. The seats were fixed. The luggage rack was bolted into the wall. The nearest loose objects were bags, umbrellas, laptops, and one lightweight waste bin. The fluorescent sleeve disappeared from the glass. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the suited man's face returned. Blood ran from his hairline into one eyebrow. He put his mouth close to the damaged window. "They're trying to uncouple the carriage," he shouted. The sentence barely carried through the glass. "What?" Alice called. He mimed pulling something downward. "Uncouple." Martin shook his head. "You can't uncouple a passenger train while it's moving." The woman looked toward the floor. "Not normally." The suited man pressed something against the glass. A railway identification card. Even through the cracks, I could make out a photograph, a dark blue band, and a company logo. Martin leaned closer. "He is staff," the woman said. "A card is not a person. He's bleeding. So are lots of people." That was when the train struck something. The impact came from below, a heavy metallic bang that traveled through the carriage floor. The lights flashed back on. Passengers screamed. A suitcase toppled from the rack and hit the aisle with a hollow crack. Rachel threw both arms over her head. For one dreadful moment, the tunnel wall outside seemed to tilt upward. I thought we had left the rails. Then the carriage settled. The wheels continued their steady clatter. A second, softer bang followed beneath us, then a rhythmic knocking that matched the speed of the train. Martin exhaled through his teeth. Something dragging. The sound grew louder near the western side. Bang, scrape, bang, scrape. A woman near the middle seats began crying and saying, we're derailing, to nobody in particular." Ridge lurched sideways. Several people dropped to the floor. Alice crawled to the window and looked down, shielding her face from the reflection with both hands. I can't see. The knocking accelerated with the train. Bang, scrape, bang, scrape, bang, scrape. Then something black whipped up past the window. Rachel screamed. It struck the glass again like a hand reaching from beneath the train. A long rubber strip slapped against the carriage side, vanished, then reappeared. "It's the door seal," I said. Nobody heard me. "It's rubber," I shouted, from the exterior door. The strip struck the window once more, folding flat enough for us to see its molded edge. Not a person, not a cable wrapped around the wheels. The seal from the jammed passenger door had been pulled loose when it closed and was now flailing against the bodywork. The explanation did not make it harmless. If the seal tore free, it might hit track equipment. If it remained attached, it could be dragged into the wheel assembly. Martin looked at the woman in seat 13. "You knew the door was jammed. Did you know about that?" "No, you don't know much when it matters." She accepted the insult without changing expression. Alice stood, using the seat backs for balance. "First attempt," she said. "We isolate the internal doors for 3 seconds. Martin opens the front one. Daniel resets the circuit before the rear lock releases fully." "You don't know there's a delay," I said. "No, but we're running out of better ideas." The smoke had crossed a third of the ceiling. It remained thin, but people were coughing more often. The train's ventilation pushed it forward in uneven waves. Rachel pulled scarves and tissues from her tote. "Cover your mouths," she told the passengers. "It won't filter the gases, but it may help with particles." Her hands shook so badly she dropped half the tissues. Alice pointed at Martin. "Get ready." He planted himself by the front door, one hand on the silver plate and the other gripping a pole. The woman moved to the rear door. She looped the strap of her handbag around both handles of the luggage rack opposite the entrance, then wedged the bag itself between the door and a vertical rail. "That won't hold anyone," Martin said. "It may slow the door." The suited man saw what we were doing. He shook his head violently. "No," he shouted through the glass. Alice stared at him. The fluorescent sleeve reappeared behind his shoulder. "Do it," Martin said. Alice flipped the INT doctor switch. Both connecting doors released with a sharp mechanical snap. Martin hit the silver plate. The front door slid open 4 inches. At the rear, the cracked door jumped inward against the handbag strap. A gloved hand shoved through the gap. The glove was black and padded across the knuckles. Rachel screamed. The woman threw her weight against the door. "Reset it." Alice flipped the switch back. Nothing happened. "Reset it." I did. The front door continued opening, slow and unpowered, revealing the dim vestibule of carriage 4. Martin squeezed through sideways. The rear door opened another inch. The handbag strap stretched, leather creaking. The gloved hand clawed at the obstruction. I grabbed the edge of the rear door and pulled. The woman pulled beside me. The mechanism resisted in both directions, released from power, but heavy on its track. The glove caught my coat sleeve. I jerked back. A blade flashed near my wrist. Not a large knife. A folding utility blade, silver and triangular. It sliced through the outer fabric of my coat and scraped along my forearm. The pain arrived hot and immediate. I lost my grip. The woman slammed her shoulder into the door. Alice joined her, pushing with both palms. Together we forced it almost closed. The gloved fingers withdrew before they were crushed. The door met the frame. This time the lock engaged. The woman's handbag strap snapped and fell loose. At the front, Martin shouted from carriage 4. "It's empty." Alice looked at my arm. "You're bleeding." The cut was shallow but long, extending from my wrist toward my elbow. Blood beaded through the torn shirt and ran into my palm. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. Sit down." Martin leaned through the open front doorway. "Come on. This carriage is clear." Our first attempt had worked only halfway. The rear door was secure again, but the front door had not relocked. Its electrical motor had gone dead when the circuit failed, leaving it open. Beyond it, carriage 4 appeared empty under bright fluorescent lights. No smoke, no attackers, a route south. Rachel started guiding passengers toward it. The woman grabbed her arm. "Count the seats." "What? Count them." Rachel stared into the empty carriage. The seats were arranged in pairs along both sides. Bags remained beneath some of them. A laptop sat open on a table. A paper cup rolled gently back and forth. But there were no people. "Where did everyone go?" Rachel asked. The woman said nothing. Martin stepped farther inside. "There's another open door at the far end." From our position, we could see straight through carriage 4 to the connecting vestibule leading into carriage 3. That door stood open too. Beyond it, figures moved. At first, I thought passengers were approaching. Then the carriage lights flickered, and I saw they were not walking toward us. They were running away. South, against the direction of travel, moving from carriage 3 into carriage 2. A man looked back over his shoulder and shouted something we could not hear. The second failed attempt began with Martin calling after them. "Hey, what's happening?" No answer. He moved into carriage 4. Alice followed. I wrapped Rachel's scarf around my forearm and went after them, leaving the woman in seat 13 beside the rear door. Carriage 4 smelled strongly of coffee and overheated plastic. Personal belongings had been abandoned everywhere. A newspaper lay spread across the aisle. A child's pink backpack rested on a seat. One phone continued playing a video with the sound muted. The emptiness had happened quickly. Alice checked beneath the nearest seats. No one down. Martin pointed toward the southern end. We follow them. Behind us, passengers began entering carriage 4 one by one. The woman remained in carriage 5. "Are you coming?" I called. She looked at the smoke gathering above seat 13. Then she picked up the snapped strap of her handbag. Not yet. The train emerged from Elstree Tunnel into wet daylight. We could finally see where we were. The southern mouth of the tunnel dropped behind us. To the east were industrial units and the edge of Boreham Wood. To the west, beyond wet trees and fencing, lay the road network around Elstree. We were reversing toward Elstree and Boreham Wood Station, perhaps less than a mile away. Relief spread through the group. "We'll be at the platform in a minute," Rachel said. The train did not slow. It accelerated. The abandoned cup rolled hard into the rear wall. Martin braced himself. Too fast. Through the side window, signal equipment flashed past. A red signal stood ahead of the rearward moving train. We passed it without stopping. Alice's face tightened. "That's not possible, is it?" "It's possible," the woman said from the connecting doorway. She had finally joined us. It's just not allowed. The intercom came alive throughout carriage 4. Passengers must move toward the front of the train, the male voice said. Do not remain in carriages 5 or 6. For once, the instruction matched what we were already doing. Rachel looked almost relieved. The woman said, Stop. You said carriage 5 was filling with smoke, Rachel replied. Yes. Then why stop? Because he wants us together. The group had compressed into the middle of carriage 4. 20 or more passengers, frightened and coughing, with no space between them. Bags caught under shoes. A man clutched a little girl against his chest. Martin stood at the southern door, preparing to lead everyone into carriage 3. The train entered the northern approach to Elstree and Borehamwood. From the windows, I could see the platforms ahead, empty. The electronic departure boards were lit, but no staff or waiting passengers were visible. Blue barriers had been placed across the platform stairs. A maintenance closure, perhaps, or an evacuation. Doors will open at the station, Martin said. We get off. The woman looked toward the platform. No, they won't. The train shot through the station at speed. Platform signs blurred past. For 2 seconds, we were level with the ticket hall. I saw 2 police officers behind the glass doors, one speaking urgently into a radio. Rachel hammered on the window. Help, one officer turned. He saw us. Then we were gone, carried north beyond the platform toward the sidings and junctions outside Borehamwood. My phone found signal. 3 bars. Everyone's phones began chiming at once, missed calls, delayed messages, news alerts. I dialed 999. This time it connected. Emergency. Which service? Police and ambulance. We're on a Thameslink train north of Elstree, moving backward. There's smoke. Someone has a knife. And I think the train has been taken over. The operator asked for the train number. I did not know it. Alice checked the digital display. It still showed 0726. Tell them we passed Elstree and Borehamwood northbound without stopping, she said. I repeated it. The operator's voice changed. Less scripted. Do not pull any emergency door releases while the train is moving. Move away from the smoke if safe. Officers are aware of the incident. Aware how? Before she answered, the signal disappeared. The call broke into static and died. At the southern end of carriage 4, Martin pulled the connecting door toward carriage 3 fully open. A sharp chemical smell hit us. Not smoke. Fuel. The floor of the vestibule beyond was wet with a clear liquid. It ran in narrow streams along the grooves in the rubber flooring and into carriage 4. Alice crouched and touched one drop with a folded tissue. Don't, I said. She smelled the tissue from a distance. Diesel or solvent. A plastic maintenance container lay on its side inside carriage 3, its cap missing. The passengers who had run south had crossed through it, leaving wet footprints toward carriage 2. The second attempt, moving forward toward safety, had placed us inside a trail of flammable liquid with smoke behind us and an unknown ignition source somewhere ahead. Back up, Alice ordered. Nobody switch anything electrical. A woman's phone rang. The sound made everyone jump. She fumbled to silence it and dropped it into the liquid. The phone struck the floor. Its cracked battery casing sparked once. A tiny blue snap. The nearest patch of liquid ignited. Flame raced across the vestibule in a flat orange sheet. Martin staggered backward, but his injured leg caught beneath him. He fell against the doorway, one sleeve entering the fire. Alice dragged him clear. Rachel smothered the burning fabric with her coat. The connecting door's heat sensor activated. It began closing automatically. On the far side of the flames, in carriage 3, the fleeing passengers turned back. They had reached another locked door ahead. They ran toward us. "No," Rachel screamed. "Stay back." The fire spread along the liquid trail between us. The door continued sliding shut. One man jumped through at the last second, landing hard in carriage 4 and rolling beneath the seats. A second passenger reached the doorway too late. The closing door separated them. She struck the glass with both hands as flames climbed behind her. Then the seal engaged. The fire alarm sounded. Metal shutters dropped over the carriage 3 ventilation grills. Behind us, smoke from carriage 5 thickened through the still open doorway. Ahead, fire blocked carriage 3. The train curved onto a track running away from the main line toward the maintenance sidings north of Borehamwood. Points clattered beneath the wheels. The route back to the station disappeared behind a high concrete wall. The woman in seat 13 looked through the front window at the sidings ahead. For the first time, she seemed genuinely frightened. "They've changed the route," she said. "To where?" I asked. She pointed. Beyond rows of parked service trains stood a low-maintenance shed with 3 open bays. Our track led directly into the middle one. The bay was dark. Its roller door began descending. The train did not slow. The roller door was halfway down when the train entered the maintenance shed. There was no impact at first, just a change in sound. The rain vanished. Clatter of the wheels came back at us from concrete walls and steel rafters, doubled and sharpened until every loose panel in the carriage seemed to rattle. Fluorescent work lights passed overhead in broken strips. Parked service vehicles flashed beyond the windows, yellow steps, hose reels, tool cabinets, stacks of replacement seats wrapped in plastic. Then the roof equipment struck the descending door. Metal tore above us. The sound was enormous and close, a violent grinding that made everyone crouch. Sparks sprayed past the windows. The carriage rocked hard to the left, throwing passengers into seats and one another. The train kept moving. The roller door crumpled across the roof, folded backward, and dragged into the shed. Something shattered above carriage 3. The fire alarm changed pitch. Martin was on the floor again. He had landed on his injured side, one arm trapped beneath him. His face had gone gray. Alice crawled to him. "Don't move." I wasn't planning to. Smoke pushed through from carriage 5 in a thicker wave. Ahead, beyond the fire door to carriage 3, orange light pulsed against the glass. The woman trapped on the far side was no longer visible. The unidentified man who had jumped through before the door closed lay beneath a bank of seats, curled around his right ankle. His name was Thomas Reed. He was 36 years old, male, and worked as a refrigeration engineer in Luton. He wore a dark work fleece and steel toe boots. His ankle had bent sideways when he landed, and one look at the swelling told Alice he would not be running anywhere. Thomas gripped the seat frame. They locked the driver out, he said. Alice turned. Who did? 3 men, maybe 4, one in rail gear. The woman in seat 13 looked at him. Where is the driver? Front cab, I think. They forced everyone backward, said there was a chemical leak. Did you see weapons? A knife, bolt cutter, something like a pistol. Martin lifted his head. Like a pistol. I didn't wait for a proper look. The train began slowing. Not because anyone had regained control. The brakes did not engage evenly. Each carriage jolted against the next, with heavy, repeated impacts. The woman looked through the window. They're using the shed buffer. What does that mean? Rachel asked. It means there's nowhere else for the train to go. At the far end of the shed, 30 meters ahead, the rails terminated at a large hydraulic stop backed by concrete. The train was still moving too quickly. People saw it one by one. The shouting began. Down, Alice yelled. Get down between the seats. Face away from the direction of travel. Rachel pulled the father and little girl into the aisle. I dropped beside Thomas and caught his shoulders before he rolled. The woman remained standing. What are you doing? I shouted. She had opened her handbag. Inside were not cosmetics or a purse. There was a high visibility vest, a short pry bar, 2 cable ties, a compact first aid kit, and a black rectangular device with wires attached. Martin saw it. That's a detonator. No, she said, door bypass. The train hit the buffer. The first impact snapped my teeth together. The carriage lifted slightly, then slammed down. Windows flexed in their frames. The overhead racks emptied in a storm of bags, bottles, and metal cases. A second impact followed as the rear carriages compressed into us. Seat frames groaned. Someone screamed once and stopped. My injured arm struck the floor. White pain flashed from wrist to shoulder. Then we were still, not silent, never silent. The shed rang with alarms, escaping air, crackling fire, falling fragments of the roller door, and the slow ticking of cooling metal. A child cried beneath a seat. Somewhere behind us, glass broke. Alice was already moving. She checked Martin's neck and shoulders, then Thomas's ankle. Rachel crawled between passengers, calling, "Tell me where it hurts. Don't stand yet." I pushed myself upright. The carriage had tilted a few degrees. Smoke collected along the western side of the ceiling. The front fire door remained shut, but flames were visible beneath it now, flickering through the rubber seal. The woman connected her black device to the electrical panel. "Who are you?" I asked. "Claire Voss." It was the first time she had given us a name. Claire Voss was 48 years old, female, and until 18 months earlier had worked as a subcontracted security auditor for the depot now surrounding us. Her voice changed as she spoke, not softer, but less controlled, as though keeping her identity separate from the situation had required effort she no longer had. "I found inventory losses," she said. "Tools, access cards, uniforms, maintenance chemicals. Then I found passenger data." "What passenger data?" "Travel patterns, names, regular services, carriage use." My work badge felt suddenly heavy against my chest. Claire looked at it. "They choose commuters who can disappear for several hours before anyone reacts. People traveling alone. People with predictable routines." Rachel stared at her. "For what?" Claire did not answer directly. "Extortion, account access, corporate credentials, sometimes identity fraud. They stage a transport failure, isolate a carriage, and collect phones, laptops, badges. Most victims think it was a robbery. The ones who see too much get threatened into silence. Martin pointed at the guide. You knew this train would be taken. I knew they planned to use this service. And you let us board. I sent warnings to the operator, the police, and the depot. The service should have been canceled. The station was closed, I said. They were trying to contain it too late. A pounding started behind us. The rear connecting door. The cracked glass bowed inward. Claire attached the final wire. Seat 13 was where they told me to sit. Alice looked up from Martin. Who told you? The people doing this. You're with them. I was supposed to identify the target carriage and leave at St. Albans. Rachel's face tightened. But you stayed. My brother stayed on one of their trains last year. Nobody spoke. Claire looked toward the rear door. He was found beside a service road in Bedfordshire. Traumatic brain injury. He can speak some days. He can't remember my name. The rear glass cracked again. A triangular piece dropped onto the floor. A black gloved hand reached through. This time it held the utility knife openly. Claire, a man shouted from carriage 5. Open the door. Claire's face changed when he said her name. Recognition, hatred, fear. The central threat finally had a voice. You put the guide up, I said, to slow everyone down. Keep them from following false instructions. Keep the carriage sealed until police could intercept. You could have told us. Monitor calls. They watch reactions. If they knew I'd warned you, they would have changed the plan earlier. They changed it anyway. Yes, the tool struck the glass beside the hand. Another section broke loose. Smoke poured through the opening. We had minutes at most. Claire pressed a button on the bypass device. Nothing happened. She tried again. The electrical panel gave a low beep. A message appeared on its tiny maintenance display. Remote override active. Claire shut her eyes briefly. First the train, then the doors, then the depot. Every control they had tried was already controlled by someone else. Thomas, still beneath the seat, pointed toward the luggage rack. Pink backpack. The child's abandoned backpack from carriage 4 sat wedged between 2 cases. What about it? I asked. Emergency hammer. A red plastic glass hammer was mounted behind the rack, almost hidden by the bag. I pulled the backpack free and took the hammer. The side windows were laminated safety glass. Breaking one would be difficult, and the shed wall outside was less than a meter away on the western side. The eastern windows faced an inspection platform running along the carriage. A possible exit, but they were sealed units, and smoke was already lowering. Claire shook her head. Glass is bonded. You'll waste time. Martin pushed himself upright against Alice's instruction. Roof hatch. We looked up. There was an emergency ventilation panel near the center of the ceiling, rectangular and secured with 4 recessed catches. It won't fit everyone, Alice said. No, Martin replied, but it may vent the smoke. His breathing came in shallow pulls. He could barely straighten his back. The rear door glass collapsed inward. A man in a fluorescent yellow jacket thrust his upper body through the opening. He wore no railway badge. His face was narrow, clean-shaven, perhaps 40. A dark bruise ran beneath one eye. In one hand, he held the utility knife. In the other, a compact black object. Thomas had been right. It looked like a pistol. The man pointed it into the carriage. Everybody down. People obeyed instantly. He pushed farther through. Claire did not. "Evan," she said. Evan smiled. "Still doing audits." He pointed the weapon at her chest. "Move away from the panel." Claire raised both hands. I was kneeling beside the eastern window with the emergency hammer hidden against my leg. Evan's gaze passed over me without stopping. He was watching Claire. That was his mistake. I hit the window. The hammer bounced. Pain shot through my injured arm. Evan turned. I hit it again lower, near the corner. A white crack spread through the outer layer. The pistol moved toward me. Martin lunged. He did not reach Evan. His back failed halfway across the aisle, and he fell into the luggage rack. But his shoulder struck Claire's handbag, knocking it from the seat. The pry bar slid across the floor. Rachel kicked it. It traveled under Evan's extended arm and struck the rear door track. Claire moved. She grabbed Evan's wrist with both hands and slammed it against the metal frame. The weapon discharged. The sound inside the carriage was flat and brutal. A ceiling panel burst above us. Not a firearm. A captive bolt tool modified to fire industrial cartridges. Still deadly at close range. Evan drove his knee into Claire's abdomen. She folded, but kept hold of his wrist. I swung the emergency hammer into the cracked window again. This time, the inner layer split. Cold shed air punched through. Smoke bent toward the opening. Alice shouted again. I struck until the hole was large enough to reach through. Rachel wrapped her coat around her hands and pulled loose shards inward. Evan cut Claire across the upper arm. She cried out and lost her grip. He aimed the tool at her head. Thomas threw his steel toe boot. It hit Evan in the mouth. The shot went wide. Alice grabbed the pry bar from the floor and drove its hooked end into the rear door mechanism. She pulled with her entire body. The damaged door shifted. Evan's torso was still through the broken window. "Daniel," she yelled. I understood. I dropped the hammer, grabbed the pry bar beside her, and pulled. Rachel joined us. The door moved 6 inches. Evan tried to retreat, but Claire caught the front of his jacket. The door slid shut across his shoulder. He screamed. The utility knife fell. The captive bolt tool dropped inside the carriage. We kept pulling. There was no clean victory in it. The broken frame crushed his arm between the door and wall. Bone gave with a sound I felt in my jaw. Evan stopped fighting. Claire let go. He collapsed backward into carriage 5, leaving one sleeve and a streak of blood caught in the gap. The door would not lock, but it was jammed shut. For the moment. "Out," Alice said. Everybody through the window. The inspection platform outside was narrow, waist-high and bordered by a yellow rail. Beyond it, stairs led down to the depot floor. Rachel climbed first to receive the child. I helped the father lift her through. Then the other passengers, one at a time. No pushing, no heroics, just coughing people passing bags, bracing elbows, dragging knees over broken glass. The smoke thickened quickly once the rear window broke. Fire had reached carriage 4 from both directions now. Seat fabric began smoldering near the front door. Martin could not climb. Neither could Thomas. Alice looked at the window, then at them. "We need a ramp." The abandoned laptop table was bolted down. The luggage rack was not. Martin's earlier collision had loosened one mounting bracket. Daniel, the compliance officer, would have waited for the correct tool. I grabbed the pry bar. Claire took the other end. Together, we tore the rack from the wall. One bolt held until the metal bent around it. The rack came free with a screech and dropped across 2 seats. We pushed it through the window, bridging the gap to the inspection platform. Thomas went first, dragged on his back by 2 passengers outside. He screamed when his ankle struck the frame and nearly passed out. Martin followed. Halfway across, his left leg stopped responding. Alice climbed after him and pushed from inside while Rachel and Thomas pulled from outside. Martin bit through his lower lip, but made it across. Claire stayed behind. The rear door shuttered. Someone on the other side was trying to free it. "Go," I told her. She looked at seat 13, visible through the smoke in the carriage behind us. Her guide still hung above it. "No, what are you doing? The bypass device. Leave it. It contains the depot access logs. Names, card numbers, dates. Police can investigate. They already did. They lost the files." The rear door shifted another inch. A gloved hand appeared at the edge. Claire went back for the device. I followed because leaving her felt too much like every decision I had made at work. Notice the danger. Document it privately. Let someone else absorb the cost. She ripped the wires from the panel and shoved the device into her bag. Flames climbed the front doorway. The carriage lights died again. We turned toward the window. The rear door broke open. 2 men entered through the smoke. One carried a bolt cutter. The other held a red fire extinguisher, using it as a shield. Claire pushed me toward the window. "Go," the man with the extinguisher charged. Claire swung her handbag into his face. The metal device inside connected with his cheek. He fell against a seat. The bolt cutter struck Claire across the back. She dropped. I picked up the captive bolt tool. I had no idea whether it was loaded. I pointed it anyway. The man with the bolt cutter stopped. "Put it down," I said. My voice barely worked. He looked at the tool, then at me. The train fire gave a loud, hollow cough as another seat ignited. Sprinklers in the shed finally activated. Water rained from the roof, striking the carriage exterior, but doing little inside. The man took one step forward. I pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. His expression changed. He knew. I threw the tool at him and dragged Claire toward the window. The bolt cutter caught my shoulder. Something cracked. My right arm went numb. I fell across Claire. The attacker lifted the tool again. Martin appeared outside the broken window, holding the loose rubber door seal. He had looped it around a steel post on the platform. Rachel and 3 other passengers pulled the other end. The heavy strip snapped taut through the window and caught the attacker behind both knees. His feet went out from under him. He fell backward into the burning aisle. His coat caught first, then his trousers. He screamed and rolled, striking seats, but the spilled maintenance liquid had reached the carriage threshold. Fire moved across him faster than anyone could approach. The second man retreated into the smoke. There was no time to see where he went. Alice and Rachel hauled Claire through the window. Thomas and Martin grabbed me. My My shoulders scraped the broken frame. The numbness vanished in a burst of pain, so severe I vomited over the side of the platform. Then I was out. All of us who could be moved were out. Behind us, carriage 4 burned from both ends. The fire reached the electrical panel. A series of small explosions traveled along the ceiling. Lights burst one by one. The windows blackened. We moved down the metal stairs to the depot floor. Nobody ran. Some could not. We limped, crawled, carried, and dragged one another between parked maintenance vehicles, while smoke filled the shed roof. Outside the bay, police sirens approached across the industrial estate. Not sudden saviors, not in time to prevent any of it, just the delayed consequence of the call, the station officers, and the train finally being visible inside a depot where it did not belong. Claire collapsed beside a stack of wooden pallets. Her upper arm was bleeding heavily. The bolt cutter strike had opened a deep wound across her back. Alice pressed both hands against it. "Stay with me." Claire looked at me. The bag. It lay on the platform above, beside the broken window. She had dropped it during the climb. Inside the burning carriage, the survival guide peeled away from the wall. The plastic sleeve shrank and curled. The words blackened from the edges inward. There was no going back for the bag, no going back for the access logs. Claire watched it burn. The cost of getting us out was the evidence she had risked everything to recover. Police entered the shed in body armor, moving around the carriage rather than through it. Fire crews came behind them with breathing apparatus and hose lines. The threat was over in pieces. Evan was pulled alive from carriage 5 with a crushed arm and severe smoke inhalation. One attacker burned to death inside carriage 4. Another was arrested near the northern service exit after trying to change out of the fluorescent uniform. The suited man was found unconscious, but alive beside the rear toilet. He was an actual railway contractor who had been forced to wear a stolen badge and repeat instructions. The elderly man with the knife was also real. He had been one of the attackers. The knife was found beneath his seat. By the time paramedics reached us, Martin could no longer feel his left foot. Thomas's ankle was dislocated and fractured. Claire had lost enough blood that she stopped answering questions. Rachel's hands were cut from clearing the window. Alice's palms were blistered from the hot pry bar. My shoulder was broken. My forearm needed 23 stitches. None of us walked away clean. But the train had stopped. The doors were open. The men who had controlled the route were dead, injured, or in custody. And for the first time since St. Albans, nobody was telling us where to sit. The first thing I remember after the shed was a paramedic cutting off my shirt. Not the sirens, not the police shouting inside the maintenance bay. Not even the fire, though people later told me the smoke could be seen above the industrial estate from the A1. I remember the scissors. They were blunt-ended, blue-handled, and they kept catching in the wet fabric beneath my arm. Each time the paramedic pulled, the material dragged across the cut in my forearm. I watched the ruined sleeve fall away in strips and thought about how expensive the shirt had been, which was absurd enough that I almost laughed. The paramedic's name was Hannah Price. She was 31 years old, female, with damp auburn hair escaping from beneath a green service cap and a narrow strip of soot across her cheek. She spoke in the calm, repetitive sentences used for people whose brains might not be processing events properly. "Daniel, look at me." I looked at her. "Do you know where you are?" Boreham-Wood. "Good. Do you know what happened?" "A train." "That's enough for now." She fitted a sling around my right arm and pressed gauze against the wound on my left. Nearby, Martin lay flat on a vacuum mattress, while another paramedic tested sensation in his legs. Every time she touched his right foot, he answered immediately. When she touched his left, there was a pause. "Can you feel that? Sort of. Is it sharp or dull?" "Dull." She moved higher. Martin stared at the steel roof beams instead of watching her hand. Rachel sat on the concrete with both hands wrapped in temporary dressings. She had stopped talking. The little girl from the train was leaning against her shoulder, even though her father was beside them. Rachel did not seem to notice. Alice was kneeling beside Claire. The paramedics had cut Claire's coat open along the back. Blood had soaked through several pads and collected in the seams of the inspection platform before she was moved. An oxygen mask covered most of her face. Her eyes opened once while I was watching. She saw me, or looked in my direction. Then the stretcher team carried her out. Nobody told us whether she was alive. That uncertainty followed me into the ambulance. Hannah gave me morphine in careful increments. The pain receded without disappearing. My shoulder became something distant and heavy, as though it belonged to a person sitting beside me. Through the rear windows, the depot slid away. Police vehicles blocked the road. Fire crews ran hoses through the main gate. Commuters stood beyond the cordon in office clothes, filming smoke with their phones. One man held a takeaway coffee while he recorded. That detail stayed with me, not because he was cruel. He probably had no idea what had happened. He was simply on his way somewhere. At Barnet Hospital, my injuries became administrative. Name, date of birth, allergies, pain score, last meal, emergency contact. My shoulder was fractured at the top of the humerus, with enough displacement to require surgery, but not enough to make the consultant swear. The cut in my forearm had missed the major tendons and arteries by less than a centimeter. 23 stitches, a tetanus booster, and a warning that some numbness in my thumb might persist. Nurse cleaned fragments of window glass from my hair. Police took my coat, shoes, work badge, and phone as evidence. Without them, I felt oddly unfinished. My sister arrived just after noon. Her name was Laura Mercer. She was 38 years old, female, and lived in Harpenden with her husband and 2 sons. She entered the treatment bay moving too fast, stopped when she saw the sling and bandages, then folded both arms tightly across her chest. "You look awful." "I know. Are you all right?" "No." She nodded. That was one of the reasons I had called her instead of our parents. Laura did not insist that reassurance was a duty. She sat beside the bed and told me what the news was reporting. A serious security incident, a suspected coordinated robbery, a fire involving rolling stock at a private maintenance facility. No mention of hijacking. No mention of the captive bolt tool. No mention of passenger data. The transport operator had suspended services between between St. Pancras and Luton, while police searched the line and depot. Passengers were being asked to avoid the area. My employer had called her twice. "How did they get your number?" I asked. "It's your emergency contact." "What did they want?" "To know whether you're alive." "That's considerate." They also asked whether you still had your laptop. I turned my face toward the wall. My laptop had remained in my shoulder bag throughout the train journey. I remembered seeing the bag beneath a seat in carriage 4 during the evacuation. I did not remember taking it through the window. Laura understood the silence. "They asked about the laptop before they asked what hospital you were in," she said. That was the first crack in the ordinary world after the immediate danger had ended. Small, explainable. Companies worried about data. Compliance departments worried about breaches. Anyone could have asked the question in that order without meaning anything by it. Still, I asked Laura to tell them nothing. 2 detectives interviewed me that evening. Detective Inspector Sarah Bennett was 45 years old, female, compact, and serious, with tired grooves at the corners of her mouth. Detective Constable Owen Mills was 29 years old, male, tall enough to look uncomfortable in the hospital chair. He took notes by hand, even though a recorder sat on the table. They started with the guide. I described the plastic sleeve, the duct tape, and the numbered instructions. Bennett asked me to repeat the wording exactly. When I reached the line about the woman in seat 13, she stopped me. "Did Claire Voss tell you why she wrote that?" "She said it was supposed to slow us down." "Did she tell you why the guide instructed passengers to ignore her?" I had not thought about that distinction. "No." Bennett exchanged a glance with Mills. "What?" "She didn't write that line," Bennett said. The hospital room seemed to narrow. "What do you mean?" The document recovered from the carriage was badly burned, but forensic officers found an earlier digital version on a printer server at the depot. 6 instructions. No reference to seat 13. I remembered the paper, the title, the evenly printed rules, the bold line larger than the rest. Someone added it. "That is our working assumption." Who? We don't know. Why? We don't know that either. The faint unease I had carried since the depot returned with surprising physical force. My left hand began trembling against the blanket. Bennett noticed and changed direction. She told me what they could confirm. The criminal group had operated through contractors and temporary employees across several rail facilities. They stole uniforms, copied access cards, and exploited maintenance procedures poorly understood by the public. Their previous attacks had been smaller. Passengers isolated during engineered faults, workers lured into restricted areas, company devices taken and returned after data extraction. Claire had reported the pattern 18 months earlier. Her concerns were passed between the operator, a subcontractor, and transport police. Each organization investigated only the portion it controlled. Nobody assembled the whole picture. The group learned she had made the report. They threatened her brother, then attacked him. After that, Claire pretended to cooperate. "She stayed in contact with them?" I asked. "Yes, for 18 months, intermittently." "Did you know?" Bennett's expression remained neutral. Different officers knew different pieces. It was the kind of answer I heard at work when nobody wanted to admit that a system had failed exactly as designed. The intended target on our train was not one person. It was three: a cybersecurity consultant carrying administrator credentials for a bank, a pharmaceutical finance director traveling with an encrypted company laptop, and me. I laughed when Bennett said my name. It sounded wrong in the room. Why me? Your employer had recently investigated a client account linked to a shell company used by the group. I flagged that account. We know. Then my company knew too. Bennett did not answer immediately. Your employer is cooperating. That did not answer the question. The attackers planned to force us to unlock devices, surrender credentials, and sign false statements claiming the equipment had been lost during a transport emergency. The smoke, blocked doors, and hijacked announcements were meant to herd selected passengers into Carriage 5. The train would then be diverted into the depot, where the robbery could happen out of public view. Claire's guide disrupted the sequence. Not enough to stop it, enough to make it messy. Hooted contractor survived. The elderly attacker with the knife died 2 days later from smoke inhalation and an existing heart condition. Evans survived surgery, but lost most use of his crushed arm. He refused to identify anyone beyond those already arrested. The man who struck Claire with the bolt cutter was the only person who died in the carriage fire. Bennett asked whether I believed I had caused his death. The question felt cruel until I understood why she had asked it. Yes, I said. You pulled the rubber strip. No, Martin and the others did. But you feel responsible. I was there. That isn't the same thing. It was too early for sentences like that to mean anything. Claire survived. I learned this the next morning from Alice, who appeared beside my hospital bed carrying 2 vending machine coffees and wearing borrowed scrubs. Her palms were bandaged. A blister rose along the side of her neck where hot metal or steam had caught her. She's in surgery, Alice said. Again. You've been here all night. They wanted to check my lungs. How are they? Still attached. She handed me one of the coffees. It was too hot and tasted faintly of cardboard. Martin had undergone emergency spinal surgery. A displaced disc and swelling had compressed a nerve root. The surgeons believed he would walk again, though nobody would promise how well. Thomas's ankle had been repaired with plates and screws. Rachel had gone home after receiving stitches in both hands. She had refused sedation because she needed to collect her son from school. Of course she did, Alice said. We drank in silence. Hospital life moved around us with deliberate normality. Breakfast trolleys rattled. A cleaner argued with a faulty dispenser. Someone in the next bay watched a daytime quiz show at high volume. What did the police ask you? I said, mostly about Claire. Did she tell you anything else? Alice looked into her cup. Said she knew they would use seat 13 because that was the marker. For what? The person coordinating inside the train was supposed to sit there. Claire, that's what she believed. But the guide said to ignore the woman in that seat. Yes, I told her what Bennett had said about the line being added. Alice stopped drinking. Claire didn't add it, apparently not. Then somebody wanted us not to listen to her, or wanted us to think she was dangerous. Alice considered that. Both worked. 3 days later, I had surgery. 2 weeks later, I returned home. The flat looked exactly as I had left it. A mug in the sink, laundry on the drying rack, an unopened letter beneath the door. Ordinary objects had acquired edges. The radiator clicking made me sit upright. The building lift alarm woke me at 2 in the morning. When the kitchen light flickered, I closed my eyes before I could stop myself. I stopped using trains. At first, this was practical. My arm was in a brace, and crowded platforms were difficult. Then the brace came off, and I still took buses. The bus journey to work required 2 changes and nearly doubled the commute. My employer told me not to rush back. Then they asked me to attend a meeting. Laura came with me, though she waited in a cafe across the street. The office near Southwark Bridge smelled of carpet cleaner and expensive coffee. My access badge no longer worked at the turnstile. A receptionist issued a visitor pass. The performance review had been canceled. In its place was a legal meeting. The company's general counsel, head of security, and my manager sat around a polished table. They expressed concern. They praised my courage. They offered counseling, extended leave, and a settlement agreement that required confidentiality regarding the compromised client account. I read every page. For once, I did not wait for certainty. I slid the agreement back. No, my manager looked genuinely disappointed. Daniel, this is designed to protect everyone. It protects the company. It protects you too. From what? Nobody answered directly. I resigned that afternoon and sent copies of my earlier reports to Detective Inspector Bennett. The wider investigation lasted 11 months. 7 people were charged with conspiracy, robbery, false imprisonment, arson, and computer offenses. 2 depot contractors pleaded guilty. Transport operations employee admitted changing routing permissions after being threatened over gambling debts. Several managers were disciplined for failing to escalate Claire's warnings. The criminal network was smaller than the newspapers suggested and larger than the police could prove. Claire testified by video from a rehabilitation unit. I saw her once before the trial. She walked with a cane and moved carefully, as though every doorway required negotiation. Her left arm had limited strength. The scar across her back pulled one shoulder lower than the other. We met in a hospital garden. Neither of us mentioned the attacker who died. She apologized for the guide. I told her it had saved people. It also kept you in that carriage. So did fear. She looked at me for a long moment. The instruction about ignoring me wasn't mine. I know. I thought Evan added it. Did he? He said he didn't. Did you believe him? No. Do you believe him now? Claire watched a groundskeeper push leaves into a neat pile. I believe he liked being credited for things. That was all she said. Martin eventually returned home using a cane. He could walk several hundred meters before his left foot began dragging. He sent us messages full of complaints about physiotherapy and train compensation forms. Rachel went back to work after 6 weeks. She did not speak publicly about the incident. Only interview was with the school safeguarding team because several pupils had seen footage online. Thomas changed jobs. Alice remained in pathology and began carrying a proper trauma kit in her bag, though she pretended this was practical rather than emotional. We stayed in contact for a while, then less often. That was not betrayal. It was recovery. We had known one another in a place where every decision mattered. Ordinary life did not offer enough urgency to hold us together indefinitely. A year after the incident, I began commuting by train again. Not every day, once a week at first. I chose busy services and sat near the doors. I checked the carriage number before boarding. I noticed uniforms, access panels, emergency hammers, and the position of every connecting door. Most mornings, nothing happened. People drank coffee. Children kicked seat legs. Rain blurred the warehouses south of St. Albans. The ordinary world returned, but it did not repair itself completely. One Tuesday, on the 7:18 service, I boarded the 5th carriage. The same time, the same route. The train had been refurbished. New upholstery, brighter lights, no seat number stickers. I sat beside the aisle. At Radlett, a woman in a navy coat entered and took the window seat across from me. She was not Claire. She was younger, perhaps 30, with headphones and a paper cup. She did not look at me. Above the luggage rack, someone had taped a missing cat notice. White paper, clear plastic sleeve, 4 squares of gray duct tape pressed flat at the corners. I stood before I realized I was moving. The notice was genuine. A ginger cat named Milo, a phone number, a photograph taken in a garden. Nothing underneath it, nothing strange. The woman across from me removed one headphone. "Are you all right?" I almost ignored her. Then I looked at the unnumbered seat beneath her. "I'm fine," I said. The train entered Elstree Tunnel. The windows turned black. For several seconds, all I could see was our reflection and the paper taped above us. In the glass, just beneath the missing cat notice, a pale rectangle seemed to show through from the reverse side. It might have been another sheet behind it. It might have been the backing card inside the sleeve. As the tunnel lights passed, I made out a printed number. Then we emerged into daylight, and it was gone. I did not pull the notice down. I did not alert the driver. I sat there until Blackfriars, listening to the ordinary scrape of wheels and the soft, irregular breathing of strangers. And that's the end of today's chilling tale. If you enjoyed this story and want more nights full of suspense, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and turn on the bell so you never miss a scare. I've got plenty more stories waiting for you, so stick around and check out the other videos on the channel. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay safe and don't look behind you. Welcome back to Mia Horror Stories. Tonight's tale, I archive old police tapes, but one recording knew what I was doing is best experienced in the dark, which is why the screen will stay black. No distractions, no flashing images, just you, your imagination, and the story. So sit back, relax, and listen all the way to the end if you dare. The voice on the tape said, "Hold it there." At the exact moment, I reached for the pause button. I did hold it there. My index finger hovered above the keyboard. The audio continued beneath the soft mechanical whir of the cassette deck. A man breathing through his nose, somebody shifting papers, a chair leg scraping across what sounded like concrete. Nothing else happened. No second command. No mention of a keyboard, a computer, or the person listening nearly 30 years later in a windowless room under the county courthouse. It was probably coincidence. That was the first thing I told myself. My name is Daniel Mercer. I was 34 years old then, male, divorced, and employed as a digital records technician for the Allegheny County Department of Court Records in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The title made the job sound cleaner than it was. Mostly, I spent my days rescuing evidence from formats nobody manufactured anymore: microcassettes, quarter-inch reel to reel tape, mini discs, VHS interviews, even a few wire recordings that had arrived from a retired township department after somebody discovered them behind a filing cabinet. The room where I worked was officially called Media Preservation B12. Everyone else called it the basement. It sat beneath the older wing of the courthouse complex, down a service corridor where the painted cinder block walls held the smell of dust, hot wiring, and wet wool whenever it rained. The fluorescent tubes overhead didn't flicker dramatically. They buzzed, constantly, a thin electrical note that vanished from your awareness until one ballast changed pitch and made you feel as if a mosquito had entered the room. B12 had no windows, one heavy fire door, and enough obsolete machinery to stock a small museum. Cassette decks lined one wall. 2 reel-to-reel machines sat beneath plastic covers. A calibrated VHS unit, which had cost more than my car, occupied a steel cart beside the digitization workstation. There were shelves of cleaning fluid, cotton swabs, splicing tape, blank archival discs, and gray evidence boxes marked with fading case numbers. I liked the room because nothing in it expected conversation. That mattered more than I admitted. After my divorce, people kept inviting me places with the careful persistence reserved for someone they believed might do something reckless if left alone too long. My older sister sent me dinner invitations 3 times a week. Coworkers asked whether I wanted to grab a drink. My landlord started lingering in the stairwell to discuss the Pirates, though I had never given him any indication that I followed baseball. I always said I had work. Usually I did. My flaw, although I wouldn't have called it that then, was that I trusted systems more than people. A tape either contained a sound or it didn't. A waveform clipped or it didn't. A checksum matched. A file transferred. Machines could fail, but their failures had causes. Dirty heads, stretched belts, magnetic decay. Human beings, by contrast, could look directly at you and decide not to explain themselves. I had spent 8 months trying to understand why my marriage ended. Then I stopped asking. On the afternoon, the voice told me to hold it there. I was transferring a box of interview cassettes from a 1997 homicide investigation. The case number belonged to the death of a man named Leonard Vale, found in a boarded duplex in McKees Rocks. The case had been cleared by arrest, according to the database. The defendant died in prison in 2011. There was no legal urgency, no appeal deadline, no active discovery request. It was backlog work, the kind I handled whenever the intake queue was quiet. The cassette in the deck had a handwritten label, Vale, Witness 4, Side B, 110697 DT. RHALPERN. The handwriting slanted sharply to the right, pressed hard enough into the paper that the letters showed through on the other side. I rewound 10 seconds and played the section again. A male detective was speaking. His voice was low and impatient. "Hold it there." Then came breathing, paper movement, and the scrape of the chair. The timing was less exact the second time because I was expecting it. My hand stayed in my lap. The phrase no longer felt directed at me. It belonged to the room on the tape, to someone who had stood up or reached for something during the interview. I leaned back. "Congratulations," I said quietly. "You've discovered verbs." The basement door opened behind me. I flinched hard enough to knock my knee against the desk. Elaine Porter, 58, female, and the records division supervisor, stood in the doorway with a foam cup in one hand and a folder tucked beneath her arm. Elaine had close-cropped gray hair, narrow glasses, and the permanent forward lean of someone who had spent 30 years reading bad photocopies. She didn't miss the movement. "You all right?" Static pop. That sounded like your kneecap. It was a very physical static pop. She came inside, letting the fire door close slowly behind her. The hydraulic hinge gave its usual tired sigh. Elaine crossed to my desk and looked at the cassette deck, then at the case management screen. "Vale case. That's what the box says. Any mold? Not yet. Sticky shed. Cassettes don't usually. I'm asking because the last batch smelled like a flooded church. These are dry." Elaine placed the folder on the corner of my desk. She had the habit of positioning papers exactly parallel to whatever surface they touched. Even coffee rings seemed deliberate around her. "County Council wants the East Liberty protest footage moved ahead of the township reels." It already is. And the public defender's office sent another request for the Naylor interview. I transferred it Tuesday. They say the link expired. It expires after 48 hours because they asked us to use the secure portal. Send it again. I did 11 minutes ago. Elaine gave me a tired smile. "This is why I keep you down here. Because I answer emails. Because you become personally offended when files are mishandled." She took a sip from the cup and made a face. The courthouse coffee was stored in foil packets with expiration dates that appeared to be suggestions rather than warnings. Elaine glanced at the cassette label. "Halpern," she said. "You knew him, knew of him." Something in her tone made me look up. Elaine was already studying the folder she'd brought, though she hadn't opened it. "What does that mean?" "It means he was a city homicide detective when I was still upstairs processing arraignment sheets." "Good detective," she shrugged once. "Productive." That isn't the same answer. No, the fluorescent ballast above the evidence shelves changed pitch. The thin whine sharpened, then settled. Elaine tapped the folder with one fingernail. "Don't spend too long on that box. The inventory says 16 tapes. Transfer them, document condition, move on." "Is there a reason I would spend too long on it?" "You spend too long on everything. That's called quality control. That's called staying until 9 because a microphone cable brushed somebody's jacket in 1989. It could have been evidentiary. It was a traffic stop, a historic traffic stop." Elaine shook her head and turned toward the door. Before she reached it, I said, The detective tells someone to hold still right before the interview pauses. She looked back. Okay, the recorder doesn't stop. Then the interview didn't pause. I meant the conversation. Elaine waited. I became aware of how stupid the observation sounded outside my own head. I reached for the controls at the same moment, I said. It lined up strangely. Elaine's expression softened, not with concern exactly, but recognition. She knew I had been sleeping badly. Most people in the office did. I had begun arriving before 7 because waking at 4:30 in an empty apartment made the day feel already wasted. Coincidence, she said. I know. You've been wearing the same shirt since yesterday. I looked down. Blue Oxford, sleeves rolled unevenly. No, you own 2 identical shirts. 3. That's worse. The door opened again before she could leave. Marcus Bell, 27, male, and a facilities technician contracted to the courthouse, entered carrying a folded ladder under one arm and a canvas tool bag in the other. Marcus was tall, thin, and always smelled faintly of sawdust, despite rarely working with wood. He stopped when he saw both of us. Am I interrupting a disciplinary hearing? Daniel is being warned about his shirts, Elaine said. Marcus looked at me. Fair. You're here for the light, I asked. I'm here because you filed 3 maintenance tickets for the same light. It's producing a fluctuating tone. It's a fluorescent tube. The ballast is failing. Marcus looked up and listened. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. The room held the layered sounds I usually ignored. Ventilation moving through old ducts, the cassette reels turning, a cooling fan inside the computer, distant plumbing knocking somewhere behind the wall. The ballast whined again. Marcus nodded. Yeah, that's annoying. Thank you. I didn't say dangerous. You used the phrase possible electrical instability. That's what a failing ballast is. Elaine pointed toward me with her coffee. See what I manage. Marcus set up the ladder beneath the fixture. Elaine left with a reminder about the nailer link, and the door side shut behind her. I returned my headphones to one ear while Marcus climbed. I kept the other ear uncovered so he wouldn't accidentally electrocute himself without an audience. The interview on the cassette resumed. Detective Halpern asked a question about a Pontiac parked near the duplex. The witness, whose name had been redacted from the transfer log, said he hadn't seen the driver. His voice was young, perhaps late teens or early 20s, and slightly muffled, as if he had his chin tucked against his chest. Marcus popped the plastic cover from the light fixture. A sprinkle of dead insects fell onto the ladder platform. Lovely, he said. On the tape, Halpern asked, Why did you go back? The witness didn't answer. Marcus unscrewed the fluorescent tube. The room dimmed at one end, leaving my desk lit by the monitor, a small task lamp, and the remaining ceiling fixtures. Shadows from the tape machines stretched across the floor in neat rectangular blocks. Halpern repeated the question. Why did you go back? The witness said something too soft to make out. I marked the timestamp and increased the headphone volume. Marcus lowered the old tube. What are you listening to? Witness interview. Anything good depends on your definition. Confession. No. Screaming. No. Then it's not as exciting as television promised. He climbed down and carried the tube toward the door. Halfway there, the tape made a blunt clicking sound. I stopped the transfer. What? Marcus asked. Possible splice. I rewound 3 seconds and played it through the external monitor speaker. Halpern, why did you go back? The witness murmured something. Click. Then the witness spoke more clearly. Is he still in the room? Marcus looked at the speaker. Detective Halpern answered. Who? There was a pause long enough to hear traffic passing outside the original interview location. Tires on wet pavement. A faint horn. The witness said, the man by the machine. Marcus glanced at me. I stared at the cassette deck. On the tape, Halpern's chair creaked. There's no machine in here, he said. The witness gave a short, nervous laugh. Not a theatrical laugh. Not sinister. It sounded like someone trying to show he understood a joke that hadn't actually been made. Then he said, not there. The tape continued for 6 seconds, with only room noise, before Halpern redirected the interview back to the Pontiac. Marcus leaned one hip against the desk. Well, he said, that's unpleasant. It could be a one-way mirror. He said machine. Copy machine in an adjacent office. Vending machine, recorder. The recorder is in the room. Then maybe he meant that. Marcus looked at the cassette deck as its reels turned. Why would he ask whether the recorder was still in the room? He didn't. He asked if a man was. The man by the machine. Yes, you are a man by a machine. I looked at him. Marcus raised both hands. I'm just helping. You're changing a light bulb. Ballast, he corrected. Possible electrical instability. I turned back to the waveforms scrolling across the monitor. A flat blue line trembled with the old tape's background hiss. Analog recordings often produced coincidences. Half-heard phrases. Sounds that seemed contemporary because the listener supplied context the original speaker never intended. That was how people convinced themselves dead relatives had left messages in static. Expectation did most of the work. I resumed the transfer. The interview moved on. Addresses, vehicle descriptions, questions about whether the witness knew Leonard Vale. Nothing unusual followed. After 3 minutes, Marcus returned with a replacement ballast and began working above me, occasionally muttering about brittle wiring. I relaxed. Then Detective Halpern said, "We can turn it off if it's distracting you." The witness replied, "It doesn't turn off." At that exact moment, my monitor went black. The cassette deck kept playing. The task lamp went out. So did the remaining fluorescent fixtures. The ventilation fan spun down, its hum dropping through several notes until the basement room became still, except for the tape. Marcus swore above me. Emergency lights clicked on in the corridor beyond the fire door, leaking a pale strip around its frame. From the cassette speaker came the quiet, steady sound of the witness breathing. Then he said, "See." Marcus climbed down carefully, one hand on the ladder, the other holding a screwdriver. For 2 or 3 seconds, neither of us spoke. A relay snapped somewhere in the wall. The lights returned. The ventilation shuddered back to life. My computer restarted with a manufacturer's chime, but the cassette deck, connected through a separate conditioned power unit, had never stopped. Marcus looked toward the breaker panel. "Building surge," he said, "while you were replacing a ballast. I hadn't connected the new one yet, so you didn't cause it. I'm happy you phrased that as a conclusion." I stopped the cassette manually. The reels froze. On the deck's counter, the numbers read 2417. Marcus set the screwdriver on the desk. You backing that up? That's the job. No, I mean separately. The system creates redundant copies. He nodded toward the evidence box. Does the next tape continue the interview? I checked the inventory sheet. Witness 4 had 3 cassettes listed, side A, side B, and an unlabeled supplemental tape. Only 2 were in the numbered sleeves. The third sat loose at the bottom of the box, sealed in a small evidence bag that had yellowed around the edges. No label, no date, just a strip of red marker across the cassette's clear plastic window. I had not noticed it earlier. Marcus saw where I was looking. Is that normal? No. The computer finished restarting. A warning appeared stating that the transfer had been interrupted and the temporary file might be corrupted. I could recover the partial recording, log the power event, and return the box to storage. That was the proper choice. The loose cassette had no documented chain of custody entry in the electronic inventory. Playing it could create a procedural problem, especially if the bag's seal had to be broken. Elaine had specifically told me to transfer the listed tapes and move on. Marcus lifted the ladder. I'm going to check the panel upstairs, he said. You coming? I looked at the loose cassette. Behind us, the deck speaker gave a tiny magnetic pop as the tape settled against the playback head. The sound was harmless. I knew that. Still, my hand moved toward the evidence bag. I didn't open the evidence bag. Not then. That distinction became important later, because for the next 20 minutes, I kept telling myself I had followed procedure. I photographed the loose cassette where it sat in the box, first with the department camera, and then again after placing a measurement scale beside it. I recorded the box number, shelf location, date, time, and condition of the seal. The red stripe across the cassette window looked less deliberate under the task lamp. It might have been grease pencil, the kind detectives used to mark reviewed evidence. It might also have been blood, although dried blood usually darkened toward brown, and I had no desire to test the theory with my thumb. Marcus stood near the door, the ladder balanced against his shoulder. You're not coming, he asked. I need to document this. You already took 6 pictures. 7. That doesn't improve my argument. The cassette isn't listed, which means it's somebody else's problem. That sentence is how evidence disappears. Marcus lowered the ladder to the floor with a metallic knock. Daniel, the lights cut out while I had a ceiling fixture open. I need to find out why before somebody upstairs plugs in a space heater and turns the building into a toaster. You said it was a surge. I said that because saying, I don't know, makes people stare at me. He pointed at the door. Panel, now, 5 minutes. Then you can come back and take glamour shots of the haunted cassette. It isn't haunted. I know. You just called it haunted. I also call the freight elevator the coffin. It doesn't mean I think it contains the dead. The tape deck clicked again behind me. A small sound, plastic settling, nothing more. Marcus looked at it anyway. I slid the evidence box into the lockable steel cabinet beside my desk and turned the key. The loose cassette remained inside its sealed bag. The Vale interview still sat in the deck, paused at 24:17. I removed it, placed it in a fresh archival sleeve, and typed a quick note into the preservation log. Transfer interrupted by facility power event. Undocumented cassette located inside source container. Work suspended pending supervisor review. The computer clock read 4:43 p.m. at 5. The records office upstairs closed to the public. At 5:30, the contract security staff shifted to evening coverage, which meant one guard at the courthouse entrance, another rotating between 3 connected buildings, and nobody stationed permanently near the basement service corridor. If I wanted Elaine to inspect the cassette before she left, I had less than an hour. That was the time-sensitive problem, as I understood it then. It was not yet the real one. Marcus and I stepped into the corridor. The air outside B12 felt colder, carrying the mineral smell that rose from the foundation walls whenever the ground stayed wet for several days. Pittsburgh had been under steady November rain since morning. Water tapped inside the old drain pipe behind the cinder blocks, irregular and close, like fingertips moving through the wall. Marcus locked the fire door behind us. "You have the key?" he asked. I held it up. "Try not to lose it during the terrifying electrical inspection." "You joke, but this building still has cloth-wrapped wire in sections. That isn't comforting. It wasn't meant to be." The nearest electrical panel sat in a utility room at the end of the corridor. Marcus unlocked it with a key from a ring attached to his belt by a retractable cord. Inside, the room smelled of warm dust, pipe insulation, and something sharper. Burned plastic. Marcus stopped talking. He set down his tool bag and leaned toward the breaker panels without touching them. "That's new," I said. "Yes, dangerous, potentially. That's not a useful scale." He looked back at me. "On a scale from annoying to evacuate the building, we're at don't lean against anything metal." I stepped away from the door frame. Marcus opened the outer panel cover carefully. The breakers inside appeared normal to me. Rows of black switches, typed labels, faded stickers left by electricians whose names had probably been forgotten before I started kindergarten. He shone a flashlight across them. B12 isn't tripped. Neither was the deck. It's on conditioned power. The computer restarted, different circuit. He moved to a narrower panel beside it and pressed the back of his fingers near the metal face without making contact. "Warm," he said. "How warm, warmer than it should be." His phone buzzed. He took it out, glanced at the screen, and answered, "Facilities." A pause. "No, I'm downstairs now." Another pause. His expression changed. "Do you mean the east elevators?" He listened, then rubbed one hand over his jaw. "Reset them once. Don't do it again. Put signs up and keep people out until I get there." He ended the call. "What happened?" I asked. "Both east elevators stalled between floors. At the same time as the outage, apparently. Could the power event have caused it?" "Yes." His answer came too quickly. I watched him close the panel. "Could replacing the ballast have caused all this?" "No." "Are you sure?" "Yes." The second answer was sharper. Marcus crouched to pack his meter and flashlight back into the tool bag. "Go find Elaine," he said. "Tell her there may be an electrical fault in the old wing. She should start clearing staff." "What about the evidence room?" "Leave it locked. The digitization equipment, leave it. There are tapes on open shelves." "Daniel." His voice cut cleanly through the humming corridor. "People first." I nodded, though something in me resisted the order. not because I valued tapes over people. I didn't. But the room downstairs was mine in a way few places had been since the divorce. I knew which machines needed coaxing, which shelves sagged, which old evidence boxes should never be stacked more than 2 high. Leaving during a possible electrical event felt like abandoning an animal in a hot car. That was the flaw Elaine had teased me about. Files did not betray you. They could only be neglected. We returned to the main basement hallway, where the overhead lights now seemed slightly dimmer. One tube near the stairwell pulsed faintly, brightening and dulling every few seconds. Marcus headed toward the east elevator machinery room. I took the stairs. The records division occupied part of the courthouse's ground floor, beyond a public counter protected by thick glass and a waist-high wooden barrier polished by decades of hands. At 4:51 p.m., most of the public chairs were empty. A printer ran somewhere in the back office. Phones rang less often as the day narrowed toward closing. Elaine was standing beside a clerk's desk, reviewing a stack of forms. I waited until the clerk walked away. There was another electrical issue, I said. Elaine didn't look up. Marcus told me. He told you. He sent a message to facilities and copied department heads. That was fast. He can communicate with people who aren't machines. There's a burned plastic smell near the panels. That got her attention. Did he say to evacuate? He said to start clearing staff. Elaine looked toward the public counter. 2 people remained in the waiting area, an older man filling out a form and a woman bouncing a restless toddler on one knee. She picked up the desk phone. Carla, shut down intake. Tell security we're closing early due to building issue. No announcement about fire unless facilities confirms one. She replaced the receiver and looked at me. What did you find in the veil box? An undocumented cassette. Sealed bag, no chain entry, red mark across the window. Did you open it? No. Play it? No. Good. She gathered the forms into a neat stack and slid them into a drawer. You logged it? Yes. Then leave it secured. We'll have evidence control inspected in the morning. I'd rather you see it before we leave. Why? Because it was inside a homicide file without documentation. That happens, does it? More than it should. Why would someone seal it and not log it? Elaine gave me a tired look. In 1997, because somebody forgot, because the property clerk was covering 3 jobs, because the detective put it in the wrong box and promised to fix it later, because databases were new and half the department thought typing was beneath them. She stepped closer and lowered her voice. You're trying to turn bad paperwork into intention. It was marked. So are half the things in storage. The witness on the other tape mentioned a man by a machine. Elaine's mouth tightened. Daniel. And the power failed when he said it wouldn't turn off. That is coincidence. I know. Do you? The question landed harder than she intended. I saw regret cross her face almost immediately, but she didn't retract it. I looked past her toward the copy room. You think I'm inventing something. I think you haven't been sleeping. That isn't an answer. It's relevant. Because I'm divorced. Because you called me at 6:12 this morning to ask whether real leader should be logged as part of total runtime. It affects duration. It could have waited until 8. The printer stopped. In the sudden lull, the office seemed wider and more exposed. Employees were beginning to collect coats and handbags. Desk drawers closed. Chairs rolled under workstations. The toddler in the waiting area started crying because his mother had taken a set of keys away from him. Elaine softened her voice. I know how you get when something doesn't fit. What does that mean? You keep pulling at it. That's my job. No, your job is preservation. You turn it into investigation because investigation has an ending. I stared at her. Elaine glanced toward the other staff, then continued more quietly. Not everything gives you an explanation just because you're patient enough. She wasn't talking about the tape anymore. That was the problem with people who knew pieces of your life. They could reach for one during an argument and claim they had only brushed against it. You don't know what happened with my marriage, I said. I didn't say I did. You implied it. I'm telling you that unresolved things bother you more than they bother most people. Unresolved things should bother people. Not enough to ignore an electrical evacuation. A chime sounded from the public address speakers. Then a male security officer's voice came through, slightly distorted. Attention. Employees and visitors in the old courthouse wing are asked to exit through the Grant Street entrance. This is a precautionary closure. Please do not use elevators. The message repeated. Elaine took her coat from the back of her chair. Go get your things, she said. Nothing else. My laptop is already with me. Then wait by the entrance. I need to confirm the cabinet is locked. You said it was. I want to check. She looked at me for a long second. No. The refusal was calm, which made it worse. I have the room key. Give it to me. That's unnecessary. Daniel, I should have handed it over. Instead, I closed my fingers around it. Elaine's eyes moved to my fist. You are not going back downstairs. I'm responsible for that room. You are responsible for following a direct safety instruction. There isn't a fire. There is an unknown electrical fault. The conditioned unit was still running. That is not the point. A security guard appeared at the end of the aisle, guiding two clerks toward the exit. Elaine stepped closer. Give me the key. My phone rang. The sound startled both of us. The screen displayed the internal extension for media preservation, B12. For a moment, I thought the call system had glitched during the electrical event. The courthouse phones occasionally forwarded incorrectly when circuits reset. I showed Elaine the display. That's my room. Don't answer it. It's probably Marcus. Marcus has a cell phone. The phone continued vibrating in my hand. Around us, staff pulled on coats and moved toward the corridor. The public address announcement repeated, flattening every word into the same calm urgency. I answered, media preservation. Nothing. Then the low hiss of an open line. Hello. A faint mechanical sound came through the speaker. 2 clicks in quick succession. A pause, then another. I recognized it before I wanted to. Cassette transport buttons. Play. Stop. Play. Aine watched my face. What is it? I held up one finger. Through the phone came an old recording, thin and distant, as though the handset had been placed near the external monitor speaker downstairs. Detective Halpern's voice said, "Hold it there." My grip tightened. Then came the witness, not the section I had transferred. A different passage. His voice was breathless and close to the microphone. He went upstairs. The line clicked. A second voice entered, muffled enough that I couldn't distinguish the words. The witness answered, "No, he took the key." Elaine took the phone from my hand and listened. Her face changed, not dramatically. She simply stopped, looking irritated. "Who is this?" she said into the phone. "Identify yourself." The tape hiss continued. Then the witness said, "Don't let him come back down." The call ended. Elaine lowered the phone. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. The security guard was approaching. "We need to tell security," I said. Elaine looked toward the public area, calculating. "If someone is in B12, the door alarm should have logged. It doesn't alarm from the inside. You locked it." "Yes. Who else has a key?" "You, facilities, evidence control, building security. And whoever called knew the extension. It's printed beside the phone." Elaine handed my cell back. This could be Marcus playing a joke. He wouldn't. You don't know him that well. He was downstairs with me, which means he heard the tape. Not that passage. You haven't listened to the loose cassette. No. Elaine pulled out her own phone and called Marcus. It rang 6 times before going to voicemail. She tried again. No answer. The security guard reached us. His name was Samuel Ortiz, 46, male, a courthouse security officer with a square build, and a habit of keeping one hand near his radio, even during ordinary conversation. His expression was polite but firm. "Ma'am, sir, we need you moving toward the exit." "There may be someone in the basement media room," Elaine said. Ortiz's attention sharpened. "Authorized person? We don't know. Was anyone left down there? A facilities technician," I said. "Marcus Bell." Ortiz spoke into his shoulder radio. "Control, confirm location of facilities contractor Bell." Static answered, then, "Last reported East Mechanical Room. No current contact." Ortiz looked at me. "What makes you think someone S in the media room?" "We received a call from the room extension." "Who spoke?" "A recording." He waited. Elaine said. An old interview tape was playing over the line. Ortiz's face remained neutral, but the slight pause before his next question told me how it sounded. Could the phone have been left off hook near active equipment? "No," I said. I removed the tape from the deck. "Any other machine program to play?" "No." "Room locked?" "Yes." Ortiz keyed his radio again. "Control, check access activity for basement B12 and dispatch an officer to the lower service corridor. Possible unauthorized entry." The reply came broken by static. "Access system showing offline in old wing." Ortiz looked toward the stairs. "The outage knocked out the card readers," he said. "It's a keyed door," I told him. "Then access records wouldn't help anyway." A clerk called Elaine's name from the exit corridor. Elaine told her to keep moving. Ortiz considered the situation for only a few seconds. "You two leave through Grant Street," he said. "I'll meet the second officer and clear the basement." "I have the key," I said. "Give it to me." I hesitated. Elaine held out her hand without looking at me. This time I passed her the key. She gave it to Ortiz. He inspected the tag. B12. "Yes." Ortiz clipped it to his belt. "You said a facilities contractor is unaccounted for." "He may just be in a dead zone," Elaine said. The courthouse radio on Ortiz's shoulder crackled. A voice said, "Sam, we've got smoke reported near the East Service stair." Ortiz answered immediately. "Visible fire? Negative. Odor and haze only. Fire department en route. The burned plastic smell. The stalled elevators." Marcus not answering. Everything that had seemed separate began pulling into the same narrow corridor. Ortiz pointed toward the exit. Out, now. This time, neither of us argued. We moved with the remaining staff through the public hall and toward the Grant Street doors. Outside, rain had darkened the sidewalk and gathered in the seams between stone slabs. Employees clustered beneath awnings, some holding coats over their heads, others already calling rides or checking transit schedules. Fire engines approached from the direction of Liberty Avenue, sirens reflecting between the buildings. I stepped beneath the courthouse overhang and looked back through the glass doors. Ortiz had not followed. Elaine stood beside me, arms folded tightly. "You did the right thing logging the cassette," she said. It sounded almost like an apology. My phone buzzed again. Not a call this time, an email. The sender field showed my own department account. The subject line was, "Transfer complete, fail supplemental." I opened it. The automated preservation system had generated a completion notice for a file I had never started transferring. The runtime was 28 minutes and 9 seconds. A secure internal link appeared beneath it. Elaine read over my shoulder. "That isn't possible," she said. Behind the glass doors, the lobby lights went out. Employees under the awning murmured as one. The emergency lights came on inside, pale and weak. My phone displayed a second notification. Source media ejected. Then a third. Checksum mismatch. Manual review required within 30 minutes or temporary file will be purged. I looked at the timestamp. 5:07 p.m. if we did nothing. The only digital copy of the undocumented recording would erase itself before the fire department cleared the building. If we went back in, we would be entering a courthouse with a suspected electrical fire, an unaccounted for facilities worker, and someone or something human operating equipment inside a locked evidence room. Elaine stared through the darkened lobby. Then she said, "Don't open that file out here." I looked at her. Why? She kept watching the building. Because if Halpern put that cassette in the box, there may be names on it that were never supposed to leave the room. The first thing we tried was the safest thing available. It failed in under 2 minutes. Elaine took my phone beneath the courthouse awning and opened the secure transfer link while I shielded the screen from the rain with my coat sleeve. Around us, employees crowded along Grant Street beneath umbrellas and stone overhangs. Firefighters were already feeding hose through the main entrance. Their boots slapped against the wet pavement, and every time the doors opened, the lobby exhaled a warm smell of scorched dust. The link loaded the county authentication page. Elaine entered her credentials. A red banner appeared. "Access DNID. File restricted to originating user. That's you," she said. "I know. Sign in." I took the phone back and typed my password. My hands were shaking just enough that I hit the wrong key twice. The page refreshed. Multi-factor authentication required a code had been sent to my desk extension. I stared at the message. "You're joking," Elaine said. "The system does that when a login comes from an unrecognized device. Your phone is unrecognized. I've never used it for archive review. Can you redirect the code?" "Not without already being logged in." We both looked through the glass doors. Beyond the dark lobby, the central corridor ran east toward the old wing. B12 was 2 levels below and roughly 100 yards away through the basement passage, past the records stairwell, electrical room, east elevator lobby, and service corridor. My desk phone was inside the locked room. Attempt 1 had ended there. A firefighter pushed through the entrance and called for everyone to move farther back from the doors. Elaine and I joined the cluster near the corner of Grant Street and Forbes Avenue. Rain blew sideways between the buildings, cold enough to sting my face. Within minutes, water had worked through the shoulders of my shirt. Elaine called the county IT emergency line. She gave the file identifier, my employee number, and the purge deadline. Then she listened for nearly a minute while somebody explained policy. "No," she said, "the originating workstation is inaccessible because the building is being evacuated." Another pause. Then override it. She listened again. Her jaw tightened. "I am the records division supervisor." Bus rolled past, spraying water from the curb. The noise swallowed part of the conversation. "What do you mean, preservation authority?" Elaine turned away from the street and pressed a finger into her free ear. "The file is attached to a homicide record." She looked at me. Possibly. Another pause. "No, I cannot verify evidentiary status because the physical source was undocumented." Her eyes closed briefly. "What happens at the deadline?" She listened. Then, "Thank you. That is extremely unhelpful." She hung up. "They can stop the purge," I said. "They can place a hold if we submit an emergency preservation request from inside the county network, the courthouse network, or the public safety annex." The public safety annex occupied a newer building across Ross Street, connected to the courthouse by an enclosed second-floor walkway. It housed emergency management offices, sheriff administration, and several conference rooms equipped for secure remote hearings. "The walkway will be locked during a fire response," I said. "We can go outside. Do you have access?" "My badge should work." "Should." Elaine glanced at the countdown on my screen. 23 minutes remained. We started walking. The annex entrance faced Ross Street, around the eastern side of the courthouse block. We crossed Forbes at the signal, moving against a stream of employees leaving the complex. Sirens bounced between the stone facades. A second engine stopped near the old wing's service entrance, where firefighters had raised a ladder to a narrow basement vent. The annex was only a block away, but Elaine wore office shoes with smooth soles. Halfway across Ross Street, her foot slid on a painted lane marker. I caught her arm. She twisted rather than falling, and I heard the sound she made through her teeth. "You hurt, ankle. Can you walk?" "I'm walking." She pulled free and kept moving with a short, uneven step. The annex lobby was bright, dry, and almost empty. A sheriff's deputy sat behind a security desk beneath a wall-mounted television, showing a local weather report with the sound muted. Elaine pressed her badge to the reader. The light flashed red. She tried again. Red. The deputy stood. "Building access is restricted during the courthouse incident," he said. "We need a county terminal," Elaine told him. "Evidence preservation emergency. You'll need authorization from command." "I supervise the records division." "I understand. A digital homicide file is scheduled for automatic deletion in 20 minutes. The deputy's expression changed slightly, though not enough to become helpful. Do you have a case number? I gave it to him. He entered something into his computer and frowned. That case is closed. The recording is newly located. Was it booked into evidence? No, Elaine said. Then how is it an evidence emergency? Because that is what we are trying to determine. He picked up a phone and made 2 calls. During the second, he turned slightly away from us and lowered his voice. Elaine leaned against the edge of the security desk, keeping weight off her right foot. You should sit down, I said. I'm fine. You're limping. I'll limp more comfortably after we save the file. The deputy hung up. Command won't authorize network access without someone from IT or evidence control present. Call them, Elaine said. It is managing the outage. Evidence control staff evacuated with everyone else. Then let us use a conference room terminal while you supervise. I can't or whoa, Elaine, I said. She looked at me sharply. The deputy kept his voice level. Ma'am, I understand you have a deadline. I also have an active incident next door and restricted systems in this building. You're not getting past the desk without authorization. Attempt 2, more official than the first, just as useless. We stepped aside as 2 uniformed officers entered carrying wet traffic jackets over their arms. Elaine lowered herself onto a metal bench near the lobby windows. 15 minutes remained. I refreshed the file notification. The secure link still demanded the desk phone code. There may be another way, I said. Elaine rubbed her ankle through her stocking. I'm listening. The archive server writes a local recovery copy before uploading. On your workstation? Yes. Inside B12? Yes. She looked at me. No, the local copy won't purge with the server copy. The building is still under fire response. The fire seems contained to the east service area. You don't know that. Neither does anyone else. That is not an argument for going inside. The room is west of the electrical panel, by 30 feet, 46. Elaine stared at me. You measured it for the disaster plan. She let out one short breath that might have been a laugh if either of us had been less tired. I crouched in front of her and lowered my voice. If the file disappears, we lose the only transfer. The cassette may still be in the room, but someone has already accessed it. If this is deliberate, they can remove it before the building reopens. Security is inside. Ortiz is inside. Marcus is missing. The card system is down. We don't know who called from my room. You're making my point for me. My phone showed 12 minutes. Elaine looked through the lobby windows at the courthouse's east wall. Smoke was not pouring from the building. There were no flames. Firefighters moved with urgency, but not panic. One carried a thermal camera toward the service entrance. I can get us through the second floor connector, she said. You said it would be locked. From this side, my mechanical key should open it. Your badge just failed. The key won't care. The deputy was speaking with one of the officers near the entrance. Elaine stood carefully, testing her ankle. We reach the connector, cross into the old wing, take the west stairwell down to records, then the basement. The west stairwell may be clear. It should put us away from the east service area. And if we see smoke, we turn around. She pointed at me. And if a firefighter or officer tells us to leave, we leave. No debate. I nodded. We did not tell the deputy. The annex elevators required badge access, so we used the stairs at the rear of the lobby. Elaine gripped the handrail and climbed slowly, placing her right foot flat on each step. By the second floor, sweat had dampened the hair along her temple despite the cold rain still clinging to her coat. The connector entrance was behind a pair of conference rooms. Elaine unlocked the door with a brass key from her ring. The enclosed walkway crossed Ross Street 20 feet above the pavement. Its glass walls rattled in the wind. Below us, emergency vehicles crowded the curb, red lights pulsing across the wet road. Halfway across, a figure appeared behind the door at the courthouse end. Dark uniform, broad shoulders, face obscured by reflections. The person stood still. Elaine stopped. I nearly walked into her. "Who is that?" she whispered. The figure raised one arm. Something dark and narrow extended from the hand. For one sharp second, it looked like a gun. Elaine pulled me behind a structural column. My shoulder struck the glass hard enough to rattle the entire panel. The figure moved closer. A flashlight beam swept across the walkway. "Stay there," a voice called. It was a firefighter holding a Halligan bar. The dark object was the hooked metal tool, not a weapon. He opened the courthouse side door and stepped into the connector, helmet tucked beneath one arm. "This passage is closed," he said. "We're county staff," Elaine replied. "I can see that. The building is evacuated. We need to access a secure record before automatic deletion. You need to go back. Is there an active fire near the west stairwell?" The firefighter's expression hardened. There was an overheated electrical distribution box in the basement and smoke migration through a service chase. "We're still checking the building." "No open flame?" I asked. "Not that we found." The explanation should have been reassuring. It was. An overheated panel accounted for the burned plastic smell, the outage, even the haze. It did not explain the call from B12 or the completed transfer. Elaine showed him the timer. 8 minutes. The firefighter looked at it, then at us. "Whatever that is, it is not worth breathing smoke." "It may be homicide evidence," Elaine said. He shook his head. "Then the police can retrieve it after we clear the structure. There may already be someone inside the evidence room." That made him pause. "Security knows." "Yes, then they'll handle it." His radio crackled. A voice called his unit number and reported a door found open in the lower west corridor. My room was in the lower west corridor. The firefighter answered, then looked at us. "You're going back to the annex." He waited until we turned. Elaine and I walked 3 steps toward the annex door. Then the courthouse fire alarm stopped. Not faded, stopped. Sudden absence of the alarm left only rain ticking against the glass and the low traffic noise beneath us. The firefighter turned toward the courthouse door. His radio erupted with overlapping voices. "Loss of alarm circuit, basement team, confirm status, officer down near West Service." The firefighter pulled his helmet on and ran back into the courthouse. The door swung shut behind him, but did not latch. Elaine and I stood in the connector. "Officer down," I said. "Could be smoke inhalation." Tease had my key. Elaine looked at the unlatched door. My phone showed 6 minutes. "We should go back," she said. Her voice lacked conviction. "Yes." Neither of us moved. Then a message appeared on my screen. Not from the archive system, from Marcus. DONT, come down. Someone has my radio. I called him immediately. The phone rang once. Someone answered. No greeting. I heard breathing, fast and uneven, followed by a metallic banging sound. Marcus, a whisper came through. Daniel, where are you? East elevator pit access. Are you hurt? My hand. Door came down. Elaine moved close enough to hear. Can you get out? She asked. I can't lift it. I lost my radio. Firefighters are inside, I said. Make noise. I have been. Another metallic bang sounded. Then Marcus said, someone answered me from the corridor. I looked through the courthouse door. The hall beyond was empty. What did they say? That they were coming. That could be a firefighter. No, his breathing hitched. No, it was a recording. The line crackled. What recording? The tape, the kid from your tape. Elaine's face tightened. Marcus continued. It played through the elevator intercom. He said, stay where you are. Then somebody tried the pit door. A scraping sound came through the phone. Marcus whispered, they're back. The call ended. Elaine immediately dialed emergency services and reported Marcus's location. I pushed through the courthouse door. She caught my sleeve. Daniel, he's trapped. We told them. They don't know the building layout. The firefighters do. The east elevator pit entrance is behind the mechanical room. If someone has his radio, responders could be directed away from him. You don't know that. We have 5 minutes, an injured man, and an unlocked door into the building. Elaine's grip loosened. Behind us, the annex door clicked. We both turned. The electronic lock had engaged. Elaine tried her key. It entered, but would not rotate from the walkway side. The connector was designed to prevent people from crossing into the annex during lockdown. Once the system secured, re-entry required a badge command from inside. Her badge reader flashed red. Again. We're locked out, she said. The courthouse door stood open behind us. The annex door remained sealed ahead. Retreat was no longer the simple option. We entered the courthouse. The second-floor corridor smelled faintly of smoke and wet plaster. Emergency lights cast dull circles along the walls. Water dripped from firefighters' boots, leaving a trail toward the central stairwell. We took the west stairs down. Ground floor, records level, basement. By the final flight, Elaine was breathing through clenched teeth. Her ankle had swollen visibly above her shoe. My shoulder throbbed where I had struck the glass, and the damp shirt against my back had gone cold. At the bottom, we found Officer Ortiz's radio lying beside the stairwell door. The microphone cord had been cut. A dark smear crossed the floor toward the west service corridor. Blood, I thought. Then the emergency light steadied, and I saw the glittering fragments mixed through it. Hydraulic fluid. The service door from one of the elevator mechanisms had leaked after the power fault. The reddish-brown oil looked almost black under the emergency lamps. The terrifying shape resolved into machinery and bad lighting. But Ortiz's radio was real. So was the cut cord. The door to B12 stood open 40 feet down the corridor. Light pulsed inside the room. Not fluorescent light, the blue-white flicker of my computer monitor. My phone vibrated. Temporary file purge in 60 seconds. Elaine braced one hand against the wall. We get the local copy, she said. Then we find Marcus. A noise came from inside B12. The cassette deck engaging, plastic gears turning. A man's recorded voice began to play through the external speaker. Detective Halpern, close the door behind you. The fire door at the top of the basement stair slammed shut. A lock clicked. We were inside the evacuated building, below ground, with our exit sealed, an injured man trapped near the east elevators, and someone waiting in or near the only room containing the recording. The countdown reached 0. My phone displayed, temporary file PURGED, then, after a pause. Local source active. The first voice inside B12 was not on the tape. Come in, Daniel. It came from behind the evidence shelves. Older, male, close. Elaine stopped beside me. Her breathing had gone shallow from the pain in her ankle, but she kept one hand flat against the wall and stayed upright. The computer monitor pulsed on my desk. The local recovery window was open. A blue progress bar sat at 100% beneath the file name. Vale Supplemental Local. WAV. The cassette deck was running, though no cassette was visible through its window. That took me a second to understand. The deck was empty. The sound was coming from the computer. Who are you? I asked. A man stepped from behind the shelving. Raymond Halpern, 72, male, was thinner than the voice on the 1997 recordings, but unmistakably the same person. His hair had gone almost completely white. His shoulders sagged beneath a dark raincoat, and an oxygen cannula ran beneath his nose to a small portable concentrator hanging at his hip. His right hand, he held Officer Ortiz's expandable baton. Not a gun. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. Elaine said his name quietly. Ray. Halpern looked at her. You always were quicker than the people around you. You're supposed to be in Arizona. I was. His breathing had a papery rasp between words. I looked past him. Officer Ortiz lay on the floor behind the shelving, one wrist secured to a shelf upright with a plastic evidence tie. Blood had dried along his hairline. His chest moved, alive. Halpern noticed where I was looking. He rushed me, he said, hit his head on the cart. I tied him so he wouldn't try again. You cut his radio, Elaine said. I needed the channel. And Marcus. Halpern's expression did not change. Wrong place. My phone still displayed local source active. Halpern followed my eyes. That file is not leaving this room. The external speaker clicked. A young voice said, the man by the machine. Halpern had arranged fragments of the original interview in an audio application. I could see the waveform divided into dozens of short regions on the monitor, each labeled with timestamps. He had been triggering them from the workstation. Not predictions, responses. He had watched me through the room's small ceiling camera, listened through the telephone handset, and selected phrases that sounded as if the witness were describing us. The explanation was ordinary. The effort behind it was not. You logged into my workstation, I said. You left it unlocked during the outage. I locked the room. Facilities has keys. You took Marcus S. Halpern gave the slightest nod. Elaine shifted her weight and winced. You caused the electrical fault. I loosened a connection in the distribution box. I expected smoke and a localized trip, enough to clear the floor. You stalled the elevators. An accident. You nearly killed people. No one was in them. You couldn't know that. I checked the call lights. His certainty irritated me more than panic would have. He had done this kind of reasoning before, reducing people to variables, deciding risk on their behalf. Elaine pointed toward the computer. "What's on the recording?" Halpern's eyes moved to her. "You know enough. I know your name was attached to cases that closed quickly. They closed because I did my job, productively." His mouth tightened. The word had landed. A metallic bang sounded faintly through the wall from the direction of the east elevator pit. Marcus. Halpern glanced toward the corridor. That was all the confirmation I needed. "He's still trapped," I said. "He can wait for the fire department. You took his radio. I left it where it would be found. You played the tape through the elevator intercom to keep him from shouting." Elaine stared at him. "You terrified an injured man because he heard you in a hallway." He saw my face. The room seemed to narrow around that sentence. Halpern raised the baton slightly. "Step away from the desk." I did not move. The portable concentrator at his hip made a soft cycling sound. Draw, pause, draw. Every few seconds, a green indicator blinked. He was old, sick, breathing supplemental oxygen. He also had a steel baton, and Officer Ortiz had already lost a fight with him. Elaine said, "Ray, whatever is on that tape, destroying it now proves intention. It proves nothing if the source was never entered. The system logged a transfer, a corrupted transfer from an undocumented cassette during an electrical failure. He had thought through the language, the report phrases, the excuses. What happened in 1997? I asked. Halpern looked at me with flat impatience. You are an archivist, digital records technician. You copy things. You don't interpret them. My job is to preserve what people decide they'd rather forget. No, your job is to preserve what belongs in the record." He nodded toward the workstation. "That does not." Another bang came through the wall, louder. Marcus was using something metal against the pit door. Halpern took one step toward the computer. I moved between him and the desk. The baton snapped outward with a metallic click. Elaine said, "Daniel." It was a warning. Halpern's arm came up. I grabbed the steel cart beside me and shoved. The calibrated VHS machine rolled between us. Halpern struck the cart instead of my head. The baton hit the metal housing with a crack that rang through B12. He stumbled back. The oxygen concentrator swung against his hip. Elaine lunged toward the desk. Halpern caught her coat and pulled. Her injured foot folded beneath her. She went down hard, striking her shoulder against the cabinet. The sound she made was short and involuntary. I drove the cart again. This time, it hit Halpern's knees. He fell sideways into the evidence shelves. Boxes shifted above him. One dropped, hit his shoulder, and burst open across the floor. Cassettes scattered under the desk and machines. Halpern swung the baton from the ground. It caught me across the left forearm. Pain flashed from wrist to elbow. My hand opened by itself. He struck again. I raised my arm, and the baton split the skin near my eyebrow instead of hitting my temple. Warm blood ran into my eye. I backed into the conditioned power unit, the same unit that had kept the deck and workstation alive through the outage. Its alarm began to chirp. Halpern pushed himself up using the shelf. "Move," he said. His cannula had slipped from one nostril. His breathing was faster now. Elaine crawled toward Ortiz, her right ankle dragged uselessly behind her. "His tie," she said to me. "Cut the tie." There were scissors in the supply drawer beneath my workstation. Halpern stood between me and the desk. He saw me look. The external speaker played another prepared clip. "Stay where you are." Halpern had triggered it accidentally when his hand struck the keyboard. For one absurd moment, all three of us froze. Then Elaine laughed. Not because anything was funny. It was one broken sound, edged with pain. "That's it," she said. "That's how you did it." Halpern looked at the screen. "You cut the witness into pieces," she continued. "Made him say whatever frightened people. He said those words. Not to us." The distinction disturbed him. I saw it. His face changed, not guilt, exactly, but anger at losing control of the frame. I pulled the emergency release on the conditioned power unit. Every connected machine shut down. The monitor went black. The speaker died mid-hiss. B12 dropped into the dim red glow of the corridor's emergency lighting. Halpern turned toward the equipment instinctively. I grabbed the fire extinguisher from the wall. He heard the bracket release and swung. The baton hit the extinguisher cylinder with a hollow clang. I drove the bottom of it into his chest, not hard enough to crush anything, hard enough to knock the breath from him. He fell against the desk, clawing for the cannula. The concentrator alarm changed from a soft cycle to a piercing continuous tone. Elaine reached Ortiz and tugged at the evidence tie, but her fingers couldn't break it. "Drawer," she said again. I stepped toward the desk. Halpern caught my ankle. I went down. My chin struck the floor. My teeth slammed together. The extinguisher rolled away, bumping beneath the tape machines. Halpern climbed onto my back with more weight than strength. The baton pressed across my throat. "Stop fighting," he whispered. His breath smelled medicinal and sour. The pressure increased. I reached blindly and found a cassette beneath my palm. Hard plastic. I drove its edge backward into his hand. He jerked away. I twisted, caught the oxygen tubing, and pulled. The cannula came free. Halpern recoiled as though I had cut his throat. He released the baton and grabbed for the tubing. I kicked it away. The concentrator remained on, pumping oxygen uselessly into the air. Halpern crawled after it. Elaine said my name. I looked toward her. Officer Ortiz was awake, barely. His eyes struggled to focus. Elaine had found the scissors and was sawing through the tie around his wrist. Halpern reached the cannula. I could have stopped him. For 1 second, I wanted to. That frightened me more than he did. I let him put it back beneath his nose. He lay on his side, drawing desperate breaths, one hand pressed against his ribs. Ortiz's wrist came free. Elaine placed the scissors in his hand. He cut the tie, securing his other arm. The metallic banging from the east pit continued. Ortiz pushed himself up, failed, and sat against the shelf. "Belle," he said. "Alive," I told him. "Trapped at the east elevator access." Ortiz looked at Halpern, then at the baton on the floor. "Kick that over." I did. He took it and collapsed it with both hands. Halpern watched us. The fight had gone out of him, but not the calculation. "The file is gone," he said. I looked at the dark workstation. "No," I said, "you completed the local transfer. You cut the power. The temporary recovery writes continuously. The checksum failed. Because you edited the playback project. The source capture is separate. Halpern's expression told me I was right. He had known enough to manipulate the audio, not enough to understand the archival system. I crawled beneath the desk and followed the power cables by touch. The conditioned unit's emergency release had opened the output circuit, but its battery still held charge. I reset the latch. The unit chirped. The workstation restarted. Halpern tried to rise. Ortiz pointed the baton at him. Stay down. The computer seemed to take forever. Fans spun. The manufacturer logo appeared. Then the recovery utility loaded automatically. An FINALIZED source found restore. I clicked yes. The progress bar began moving. 2%, 5. Behind me, Elaine's breathing had become irregular. Her face was gray under the red emergency light. How bad? I asked. Ankles broken. You don't know that. I heard it. Ortiz touched the cut above his eyebrow and looked at the blood on his fingers. We need to move. Marcus first, Elaine said. Fire crews are searching. Someone has been using your radio, I told Ortiz. Reached for his shoulder microphone before remembering it was gone. The recovery reached 31%. Halpern looked toward the open door. A radio voice sounded in the corridor. Basement West team, respond, Ortiz frowned. That isn't my radio. Halpern moved. He rolled toward the extinguisher, grabbed it, and hurled it into the conditioned power unit. The metal cylinder struck the battery housing. There was a sharp electrical pop. White sparks sprayed from the rear vent. Smoke rose immediately. The workstation screen flickered. Recovery, 64%. The power unit alarm screamed. I lunged for the extinguisher. Halpern seized the edge of the desk and pulled himself toward the door. Ortiz tried to stand and nearly blacked out. Elaine caught his sleeve, keeping him from falling onto her injured leg. The smoke thickened, greasy and bitter. A cable sheath began to melt. I yanked the workstation's power cord from the damaged unit and searched beneath the desk for another source. The wall outlet was dead. Then I remembered the task lamp. It had been connected to the red emergency receptacle supplied by the courthouse generator. I tore the lamp plug free and forced the workstation plug into the outlet. The screen went black, then came back. Recovery, 82%. Halpern reached the corridor. I followed him. He was limping toward the East Service Passage, one hand trailing along the wall. The concentrator dragged behind him, its wheels catching in the joints between floor tiles. Stop, I shouted. He didn't. Ahead, beyond the central junction, came Marcus's banging. Halpern was going toward him. I ran. My left arm barely worked. Blood kept sliding into my eye. The corridor tilted with each step. Halpern reached the mechanical room door and pulled it open. Marcus was visible beyond the machinery, trapped behind a partially lowered steel access panel. One hand protruded beneath it, swollen and slick with blood. Halpern grabbed a red valve wheel beside the elevator hydraulic assembly. Marcus shouted, "Don't touch that." Halpern turned it. The access panel dropped another 2 inches. Marcus screamed. I hit Halpern from behind. We both struck the concrete floor. His oxygen concentrator toppled and cracked against the wall. The alarm stopped. Halpern clawed for the valve. I caught his wrist. He was weaker now, So was I for several seconds. Neither of us could gain ground. We lay beside the machinery, breathing through smoke drifting from the west corridor. Marcus said, "Clockwise. Turn it clockwise." I released Halpern and grabbed the valve. Turned. The wheel resisted, then moved. The panel lifted slowly. Marcus pulled his injured hand free and rolled onto his back. 2 fingers bent at angles fingers should not bend. Halpern reached for the valve again. Marcus kicked him in the shoulder. Not hard. Enough. Halpern rolled away and lay still, coughing against the concrete. Footsteps pounded in the corridor. Firefighters this time. Real voices. Real commands. They found us beside the elevator machinery, Marcus cradling his damaged hand, Halpern struggling to breathe without a working concentrator, and me holding the valve open with both arms because letting go would drop the panel again. Back in B12, the workstation completed recovery before the damaged power unit finally failed. The source file survived. So did all of us. But survival was not clean. Elaine's ankle was fractured in 3 places. Marcus lost the tip of his left ring finger and required surgery on 2 others. Ortiz received 12 stitches and was diagnosed with a concussion. Halpern broke 2 ribs and spent 4 days under guard in a hospital respiratory unit. I needed 9 stitches above my eye and wore a brace on my left arm for 6 weeks. The supplemental recording was placed into evidence under emergency authority before midnight. The red stripe across the cassette was grease pencil. Written beneath the plastic shell, visible only after evidence technicians removed it, were 3 words: "Do not duplicate. RH." The initials belonged to Raymond Halpern. The recording itself contained the voice of the frightened young witness, Detective Halpern, and at least 1 other man in the room. Near the end, the other man used a name Elaine recognized, a name that had remained inside the county police department for almost 30 years. The immediate threat was over. Halpern was in custody. Marcus was free. The file was preserved. Yet, when the recovered audio began playing for investigators in a secure interview room, I had to leave before the first minute ended. The witness breathed into the old microphone. A chair scraped. Then Halpern's younger voice said, "Hold it there." My hand stopped halfway to the door. The first official version of what happened in the courthouse was 12 pages long and wrong in 6 places. It said the evacuation began at 5:03 p.m. It began earlier. It said Raymond Halpern entered media preservation, B12, using an unreturned departmental key. He used Marcus's facilities ring after taking it from him near the east elevator machinery room. It described the damage to my workstation as minor heat exposure, which ignored the melted insulation, the smoke staining under the desk, and the fact that the conditioned power unit had fused itself into a black plastic lump. Most importantly, it said the supplemental cassette was located during a routine archival review. There had been nothing routine about it. I read the report from a hospital chair beside Elaine's bed, while an orthopedic resident drew lines on an X-ray of her ankle. 2 fractures were obvious even to me. The third was a thin break near the joint that the resident kept circling with a capped pen. Elaine watched him with the expression she usually reserved for badly indexed files. "So what happens?" she asked. "Surgery," he said. "Plates and screws. Likely no weight bearing for 6 to 8 weeks. 6, possibly 8. I live on the 2nd floor. You'll need help. I have a railing." The resident looked at me. I shook my head. "She'll need help," I said. Elaine gave me a flat look. "You have one functional arm. I have stairs. That is not the same qualification." The resident left to speak with the attending surgeon. Elaine waited until the curtain closed behind him. "Why does the report say routine review, county council?" "Of course. It also says Halpern experienced a medical event during apprehension. He lost a fight. He is 72 and uses oxygen. He hit you with a baton." I noticed. My left forearm was wrapped from wrist to elbow. Nothing had broken, but the swelling compressed a nerve enough that 2 fingers remained numb for several days. The cut above my eye had been stitched in the emergency department. Every time I raised my eyebrow, the skin pulled tight. Elaine reached for the report. "Does it name the voice on the cassette?" "No." "Then it is not a report. It is a weather description." She pushed it back. The supplemental recording lasted 28 minutes and 9 seconds. Only 17 minutes contained conversation. The rest held chair movement, traffic, the hum of old fluorescent lighting, and long pauses in which the young witness appeared to be deciding whether speaking was more dangerous than silence. His name was Thomas Vick, 19 years old in 1997. He had been arrested twice for minor theft and once for possession of a stolen vehicle, though the last charge was later dismissed. He lived with his mother in Stowe Township and worked irregular hours at a tire shop along Island Avenue. Thomas had seen more than a Pontiac outside the boarded duplex where Leonard Vale died. He had seen 2 city detectives remove a canvas duffel bag from the building before patrol officers secured the scene. One detective was Raymond Halpern. The other voice on the supplemental cassette belonged to Lieutenant Edward Maris, then Halpern's immediate supervisor. Maris had entered the interview room after Thomas described the bag. He did not identify himself for the recording. He told Thomas that the vehicle charge could return if his memory became unreliable. He reminded him that people in McKee's Rocks knew where his mother lived. The threat was never stated plainly. It did not need to be. Halpern then restarted the formal interview from a point earlier in the conversation and guided Thomas through a narrower account. The Pontiac, an unknown driver, no view into the building, no knowledge of the officers present before the scene was established. That became the official tape. The supplemental cassette contained what came before. Leonard Vale had worked as a bookkeeper for several small construction companies. Investigators reviewing old financial records discovered that one of those companies had been used to route cash to police officers in exchange for ignoring illegal gambling rooms and stolen goods operations along the Ohio River corridor. The duffel bag was never recovered. Neither was a ledger Thomas said Halpern carried from the duplex under his coat. The man convicted of Vale's murder had been a low-level burglar named Curtis Boone. Boone confessed after a 16-hour interrogation and later tried to withdraw the statement, claiming detectives had fed him details from the scene. Those appeals failed. Boone died in prison 14 years later. There was no clean ending available for him. That became the part everyone spoke around. The district attorney announced a review of the Vale investigation, and 17 other cases involving Halpern and Maris. The city police bureau opened an internal inquiry, though both men had been retired for years. Maris had died in 2018, which allowed newspapers to use phrases like alleged misconduct without worrying about whether anyone would answer them. Halpern was charged with aggravated assault, burglary, evidence tampering, reckless endangerment, unlawful restraint, and several offenses connected to damaging the courthouse electrical system. His attorney argued that oxygen deprivation and cognitive decline had affected his judgment. The court ordered an evaluation. He was found competent. I never saw him again. Marcus stayed in the hospital for 3 nights. When I visited, his left hand was suspended in a foam brace above the bed. 2 fingers were pinned. The ring finger ended just below the final joint beneath a thick dressing. He looked at my bandaged arm and said, "You look worse." That's objectively false. I have better lighting. A basketball game played silently on the television. Marcus had always filled pauses with jokes. After the courthouse, he let them sit longer. "I should have locked the mechanical room door behind me," he said. "He had your key. After he hit me, you didn't know he was there. I heard something in the corridor. You thought it was a firefighter. I thought it was you. That bothered me." "Why?" Marcus looked at the television. He said my name. "Halpern." From around the corner said, "Marcus, bring the meter." "You had asked about the panel, so I figured you defollowed me down." He must have heard Elaine say your name. Maybe. His eyes remained on the screen. "You don't think so?" "I think he knew the building better than he should have. He worked homicide. Detectives used the old wing. In 1997, he could have studied floor plans. Maybe. That word again. Marcus picked at the edge of his blanket with his good hand. "I keep hearing the pit door, the banging, the panel dropping." He swallowed. "I know it isn't happening. I still hear it when the elevator stops between floors. You've been in an elevator once. That seems early. I needed to know." That was consistent with Marcus. He fixed things by going back to them. It was also how fear sometimes disguised itself as practicality. Officer Ortiz returned to limited duty after 3 weeks. His concussion headaches lasted longer than expected. He sent Elaine a handwritten note thanking her for cutting the restraint from his wrist. She kept it inside the front cover of a policy binder where nobody would see it. Elaine's surgery took 4 hours. She spent 6 weeks in a cast, then another month in a walking boot. She refused most offers of help and accepted mine only because I began arriving at her house with groceries without asking permission. Her house was in Dormont, on a steep street where parking required turning the wheels toward the curb. The first time I brought her home from physical therapy, she looked at the hill and said, "Pittsburgh was designed by someone who hated ankles." We developed a routine. I carried laundry downstairs. She reviewed revised evidence procedures on a tablet. Neither of us mentioned my divorce unless she wanted me to leave early, at which point she would say something like, "You should go home and sit with your unresolved emotions." It was not a kind joke. It was funny anyway. The courthouse remained partially closed for 12 days. B12 stayed sealed longer. Investigators photographed every shelf, cable, footprint, cassette, and tool. They recovered Halpern's laptop from a rented room in Monroeville. It contained scanned courthouse plans, old personnel rosters, photographs of service entrances, and a spreadsheet tracking which employees worked late. My name appeared 37 times. He had begun watching the preservation backlog almost a year before the veil box reached my desk. That was how the recording knew what I was doing. Halpern knew what I was likely to do. He had read my maintenance requests, reviewed my transfer logs, and watched through the ceiling camera after entering the room during the outage. He knew I paused recordings at irregular sounds. He knew I documented everything. He knew I would resist abandoning an unlisted piece of evidence. He did not need to predict me. He had studied my habits until they became useful. That explanation was worse than any supernatural one. A ghost would have had no reason to care that I owned 3 identical blue shirts. Halpern did. He had a photograph of me leaving the courthouse in one. The county moved media preservation to a renovated room in the public safety annex. It had 2 windows, new electrical service, card access, interior cameras with visible status lights, and an emergency exit that opened directly into a stairwell. Everyone called it an upgrade. For the first month, I hated it. Traffic noise came through the windows. People passed the glass wall carrying coffee and talking about lunch. The room no longer felt separate from the building. It no longer belonged entirely to me. That was probably healthy. I stopped staying until 9. At first, I left because Elaine ordered it. Later, I left because I had begun to understand that being alone with a system did not make me safer. Systems could be studied. Credentials could be stolen. Logs could be rewritten. A man could learn which automatic notifications would pull you back toward danger. I also stopped wearing the identical shirts. That was Marcus's suggestion. Make yourself less predictable, he said. He meant it as a joke. I bought a green one anyway. The Veil supplemental recording became part of a special evidence collection with restricted access. Every playback required 2 authorized employees in the room. The original cassette was stored in a climate-controlled vault. 3 verified digital copies were created and held separately. I supervised the transfers. When the witness said, "The man by the machine," I paused the recording. The other technician looked at me. "You okay?" Yes, I was not. I continued. Thomas Vick was located in Ohio under a different surname. Investigators interviewed him twice. He remembered the threats. He remembered Halpern. He remembered Lieutenant Maris standing behind him with one hand on the back of the chair. He did not remember saying, "It doesn't turn off." When they played that section for him, he listened 3 times. Then he said, "That isn't about the recorder." The investigators asked what it meant. Thomas refused to answer. He ended the interview soon after. That became the one thread nobody could close. The audio around the sentence had been examined by specialists. No edits, no later overdub. The phrase was present on the original magnetic tape. It had a simple explanation, surely. A light, a fan, a camera. The one-way observation system. Some machine inside the interview room that Thomas found distracting. The 1997 floor plan showed no permanent equipment besides the cassette recorder. But floor plans are incomplete. Memories decay. People use vague words when afraid. I knew all of that. Nearly a year after the courthouse incident, I returned to work on a Monday morning and found a padded envelope on my desk. No return address. The mail room stamp showed it had entered the county system the previous Friday. Inside was a microcassette. No evidence bag, no note. A red stripe had been drawn across its clear plastic window. I did not play it. I called security, cleared the room, and photographed it from a distance while another technician watched. The cassette went directly to the evidence laboratory. It contained 11 minutes of blank tape, not silence. Blank tape has sound, low magnetic hiss, small fluctuations in the oxide, the faint mechanical rhythm of whatever recorder first wound it. At 10 minutes and 56 seconds, there was a click. Then 4 seconds of room tone. That was all. Investigators traced the envelope through the courthouse mail system, but found no usable prints, no clear camera image, and no identifying DNA. It may have been a prank by someone who had read the news coverage. That was the most reasonable explanation. It remains the official one. I still archive police tapes. The work feels different now. Less pure, more human. Every recording contains not only what was said, but what somebody chose to preserve, where they stopped the machine, which label they wrote, what they left outside the official interview. I no longer trust a clean chain of custody simply because the fields are complete. I check the gaps. I listen to the room. Most days are ordinary. Printers jam. Attorneys send expired links. Elaine, back at work with a slight permanent limp, aligns folders with the edge of my desk. Marcus visits when a light makes a sound I dislike and reminds me that he is now qualified to repair it one-handed. Sometimes, late in the afternoon, the new room grows quiet enough for me to hear the computers breathing through their fans. When that happens, I save my work. I log out. I leave with everyone else. But I keep the 4 seconds from the anonymous microcassette in a separate analysis file against policy and without telling Elaine. I have amplified it only once. There is no voice, no hidden message, just a soft scrape near the end, like a chair leg moving across concrete. Then a small mechanical click, the kind a cassette deck makes when someone reaches over and presses stop. The shadows fade for now, but the stories never end. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and join our community of horror lovers. If you're hungry for more, check out the next video. Just remember, the scariest part is often the one you don't see coming.